reshape into exactly what they need. Ma-Ra's flow, she murmured, watching the cubs bow to their students. I suppose that has a nice ring to it. Indeed, Vexthora said, though I suspect in a few generations, they won't even remember it came from yoga. It will simply be Felinar tradition. I suppose one more thread in the tapestry of shared galactic culture. Good, Mara said. That's how it should be. And somewhere in the quantum probabilities that Krillians could perceive, Commander Vexthora saw a future where 1,000 species practiced their own versions of Ma-Ra's flow. Each one unique, each one adapted, each one a testament to what happened when humans shared their gifts freely with the universe. In every timeline, it was beautiful.
On a quiet Monday morning, 3 alien warships broke through the clouds over Fort Bragg, and their commander laughed at what his scanners showed him. Just soldiers, just rifles. Just men in green uniforms drinking coffee. He had no idea he had just picked the one base on Earth he should have left alone. Before we step into this journey, hit that like button, subscribe if you are new, and drop a comment telling me where you are watching from tonight. Now, let's go back to the moment it all started. Fort Bragg woke up like it did every Monday. Trucks rolled down gravel roads. Boots hit pavement in steady rhythm. Steam rose off cups of black coffee in the mess hall. Nobody on that base expected the sky to change before lunch. Colonel Robert Hayes had been in charge of the garrison for 6 years. He was 51 years old, broad-shouldered, with gray creeping into his short hair and a voice that could stop a room without him raising it once. He was standing outside headquarters going over a supply report when the birds went quiet. That was the first sign. Dead silence. No wind, no birds, no hum of distant traffic. Then the sky tore open. 3 shapes dropped out of the clouds, dark and angular, moving with a kind of silence that felt wrong for something that large. They hovered above the training fields, casting shadows that swallowed entire companies of soldiers standing in formation. Master Sergeant Dale Whitman was mid-sentence, correcting a recruit's rifle stance when he looked up and simply said, "Well, that's new." Radios across the base lit up at once. Every channel filled with the same confused, overlapping voices. Colonel Hayes didn't wait for the confusion to sort itself out. He grabbed his radio and gave the only order that made sense. All units hold position. Nobody fires unless fired upon. Let's see what we're dealing with. The 3 ships settled low over the open field near the airborne training area, kicking up dust in slow, deliberate waves. A ramp opened on the lead vessel. Steam poured out into the morning air. Then came the first alien soldier. He stood roughly 7 feet tall, covered in dark plated armor that looked more grown than built. His skin, where it showed at the joints, had a faint gray sheen. He carried a weapon that hummed faintly like it was breathing. Behind him came dozens more, forming disciplined ranks with mechanical precision. Corporal Sam Reeves, crouched behind a supply truck with his rifle ready, muttered to the private beside him, "They walk like they've never lost a fight in their lives." Private Danny Holt, chewing gum like his life depended on it, replied. He wore armor with more ornamentation than the rest, gold trim tracing down his chest plate, and he studied the base with open amusement. His voice, translated through some device built into his collar, rang out across the field. "This world's defenders," he said, tone dripping with mockery. "Rifles and dirt roads." We expected more of a fight. Colonel Hayes stepped forward, hands empty, posture calm. "I'm Colonel Robert Hayes, this is Fort Bragg. You're standing on United States Army property." The alien commander tilted his head, clearly unfamiliar with the word army, but not unfamiliar with the tone of a man who wasn't afraid. "I am General Threl Vask of the Korathi Dominion," he announced. "This world has been selected for resource acquisition. Your kind will comply or be removed." Behind Hayes, a low murmur ran through the ranks of soldiers. Not fear, something closer to disbelief mixed with irritation. Sergeant First Class Ethan Cole leaned toward Whitman and whispered, "Did he just say remove us? From Fort Bragg?" Whitman didn't blink. "Son, he has no idea what he just walked into." Hayes kept his tone level, giving nothing away. "You picked one hell of a Monday to land here, General." Vask laughed, a dry mechanical sound. Location was randomized. Your world's coordinates were simply the closest viable landing zone. Random, Hayes repeated quietly. Then, almost to himself, of course it was random, because Fort Bragg wasn't just any patch of land. It was home to some of the most trained, most stubborn, most relentlessly capable soldiers on the entire planet. Airborne units, special operations. Communications specialists who could reroute an entire battlefield network before breakfast. Logistics teams who could move an army across an ocean scanning the perimeter. His soldiers moved with total confidence, treating the base like an afterthought, a formality before conquest. That confidence was about to become a problem. Private Wyatt Cross, watching from the tree line with a pair of binoculars, spoke quietly into his radio. "Command, be advised. Their point squad just walked past our ammunition supply depot without stopping to look inside." Colonel Hayes allowed himself the smallest. Now Fort Bragg looked calm, organized, almost passive. But underneath that calm, radios were already buzzing with quiet, coordinated movement. Positions were shifting. Communications teams were pulling data. Airborne units were staging without a single visible change on the surface. General Vask stood in the middle of the field, arms behind his back, admiring his own ships like a man who had already won. He had no idea that 300 meters behind him, an entire operations center was already building a plan built on decades of hard lessons, real combat experience. And the one thing these aliens had clearly never accounted for. They had landed in the wrong yard, and Colonel Hayes was about to make sure they learned exactly why. Inside the base operations center, the mood was tense but controlled. Maps and readouts filled the room with quiet, static energy. Colonel Hayes stood at the center table, flanked by his senior staff, watching updates roll in from every corner of the base. "Talk to me," Hayes said. "What are we looking at?" Major Lisa Grant, head of base intelligence, pointed to the readout in front of her. 3 landing craft, sir. Troop numbers estimate somewhere around 400, spread across the training fields and the edge of the airborne range. Their weapons emit an energy signature we've never logged before, but preliminary data suggests standard kinetic shielding on their armor, nothing that stops a well-placed round completely. "Just slows it, so they can be hurt," Hayes said. "Yes, sir, just not easily." Sergeant First Class Ethan Cole leaned over the table. "Sir, with respect, half our guys already want to know why we're not moving yet." Hayes didn't look up from the map. "Because the second we open fire, this becomes a war neither side can walk back from. I want to understand what we're dealing with before we commit to that." Outside, the alien soldiers continued their slow sweep of the base perimeter, confident and unhurried. General Vask walked the open field like a man inspecting property he already owned, occasionally pausing to examine a fence post or a parked vehicle with mild curiosity. Near the motor pool, Corporal Sam Reeves and Private Danny Holt were tucked behind a row of parked trucks, watching 2 alien soldiers examine a Humvee like it was some kind of ancient artifact. "They're actually touching it," Holt whispered, "like they've never seen a truck before." "Maybe they haven't," Reeves said. "Maybe out there in space, everybody just floats everywhere." One of the alien soldiers reached out and pressed a clawed hand against the Humvee's hood, testing the metal. The vehicle's alarm went off immediately, a sharp, blaring horn that echoed across the open field. Both aliens jumped back so fast one of them tripped over his own weapon. From behind the trucks, Holt covered his mouth to keep from laughing out loud. Reeves elbowed him hard. "Do not," Reeves whispered, "let them hear you laughing at their tactical retreat from a car alarm." Back in operations, that exact moment showed up on the base's internal reporting feed. And even Colonel Hayes allowed himself a brief, tight smile before turning back to business. "Grant, what's the situation with their ships?" "Still hovering, sir. No sign of additional reinforcements incoming yet. If they called for backup, we haven't detected the signal." "Good. That buys us time." Hayes turned to Whitman. "Dale, I want 2 things. First, I want every non-combat personnel moved to secure buildings, quiet and controlled, no panic. Second, I want our best marksmen positioned along the tree line out of sight, and I want eyes on every single one of their weak points." Whitman nodded once. "Already moving, sir." Outside, General Vask returned to the center of the field, addressing Colonel Hayes again through the translation device. Your world grows more curious by the minute, Vask said. Your soldiers hide behind vehicles instead of forming ranks. Is this some form of primitive strategy? Hayes stepped forward again, calm as ever. It's called cover general. You might want to look into it. Vask's jaw tightened slightly, the closest thing to irritation his alien expression allowed. You stall for time, Colonel. It will not save you. Maybe, Hayes said. Or maybe you're about to learn why nobody invades an active military installation without doing their homework first. Vask laughed again, that same dry mechanical sound. Though this time, there was a flicker of something else behind it. Uncertainty, perhaps, though he would never admit it. Meanwhile, near the eastern fence line, Sergeant Cole was crouched with two of his men, watching a group of alien soldiers attempt to interface with the base's outer communication tower. One of them placed a device against the metal frame, and sparks immediately shot out, sending all three aliens stumbling backward. They're trying to hack our comms, Cole whispered into his radio. And it's fighting back. In operations, Major Grant almost laughed. Our systems weren't built with universal alien compatibility in mind, sir. Looks like they're finding that out the hard way. Hayes allowed himself one more small smile before his expression hardened again. Let's make sure that's the only thing that surprises them today. He turned to the room, every eye on him. Listen up. These things are strong, disciplined, and confident. That confidence is the only weakness we've seen so far. They think this is going to be easy. We are going to prove them wrong, but we do this smart. No wild shots, no unnecessary losses. We use everything we have, our training, our terrain, our people. Outside, unnoticed by General Vask, 3 Black Hawk helicopters were quietly powering up in a hangar half a mile away. Their rotors just beginning to turn. And far across the base, deep in a communications building the aliens hadn't yet reached, a young specialist was already typing furiously, sending a message no one on that field could have predicted. A message headed straight for the Pentagon, because Fort Bragg wasn't planning to fight this war alone for long. Inside the communications building, Specialist Casey Miller sat hunched over her terminal, fingers moving fast across the keyboard. She was 24 years old, sharp and calm under pressure in a way that made older soldiers trust her instincts without question. "Colonel," she said into her headset, "message is away." Pentagon confirmed receipt. They're already looping in Joint Chiefs and requesting a live status update every 10 minutes. Colonel Hayes exhaled slowly. "Good work, Miller. Keep that line open no matter what happens out there." "Yes, sir." Outside, tension on the field was rising. General Vask had grown tired of waiting for what he considered a proper response to his ultimatum. He turned to his second-in-command, a broad-shouldered alien officer named Commander Threck, and gave a short, sharp order. "Advance the second wave. Let them see real numbers." More alien soldiers poured out from the landing ships, forming tighter, more aggressive lines. Their weapons hummed louder now, a collective vibration that seemed to shake the ground beneath their boots. Colonel Hayes watched the buildup from a covered position near the command post, jaw tight but expression unreadable. "They're pushing," Whitman said beside him. "Trying to force our hand. Then we don't give them the reaction they want," Hayes replied. "Hold every position. Nobody fires first." Near the tree line, Sergeant Cole adjusted his rifle scope, watching the alien ranks grow. Beside him, a young private named Ryan Walsh shifted nervously. "Sarge, there's a lot of them now." Cole didn't look away from his scope. "There's a lot of us too, Walsh. They just haven't figured that part out yet." General Vask raised his voice again, addressing the entire base as though delivering a verdict. "You have 5 minutes to lower your weapons and surrender this territory. After that, we begin removal by force." Colonel Hayes stepped forward one more time, standing tall in the open field despite the obvious danger. "General, let me explain something about this place." His voice carried clearly across the silence. "This isn't just a base, this is Fort Bragg. Home to more combat-trained soldiers than most countries have in their entire military. Every man and woman standing here has trained for years for exactly this kind of moment. You didn't just land in someone's backyard. You landed in the one place on this planet built to make sure moments like this don't end well for people who threaten it." Vask's mechanical laugh returned, though weaker this time. "Confidence will not stop energy weapons, Colonel." "No," Hayes agreed, But planning will. At that exact moment, the quiet hum of rotors grew louder in the distance. General Vask turned his head toward the sound, confusion crossing his alien features for the first time. 3 Black Hawk helicopters rose over the tree line, flying low and fast, flanking the alien position from 2 different directions. Behind them, disciplined formations of soldiers who had been quietly repositioning during the standoff began emerging from cover, weapons ready but still not firing. "Colonel," Vask said, voice sharp now, "what is this?" "This," Hayes said calmly, "is us showing you exactly how prepared we are. Before things get worse for everyone." For the first time since landing, doubt flickered across General Vask's expression. His soldiers, disciplined as they were, exchanged uncertain glances as the sound of engines and rotors surrounded them from multiple directions at once. Commander Threck leaned toward Vask, voice low. "General, our scans show additional units mobilizing from structures we hadn't detected before." Vask's confidence cracked slightly, though he masked it quickly. "Numbers mean nothing against superior technology." "Maybe," Hayes said, overhearing the exchange through the open channel. "But numbers backed by training, terrain, and time to prepare mean everything." He raised one hand, a signal only his own soldiers understood. Every rifle on the field shifted almost imperceptibly, aligning perfectly with predetermined targets, still holding fire, still waiting. General Vask's 5-minute deadline ticked closer, the tension stretching tighter with every passing second. Somewhere above, the Black Hawks circled once, engines roaring louder, forcing the alien ranks to look skyward instead of forward. And in that single distracted moment, Colonel Hayes gave the only order that mattered. "Hold until my mark," he said quietly into his radio. Not 1 second before, because General Vask had come expecting an easy conquest. Instead, standing right in front of him, hidden behind calm words and quiet movement, was an entire base that had spent the last 20 minutes turning his overwhelming confidence into the very thing that was about to destroy his advantage completely. The countdown reached its final seconds, and Fort Bragg was ready. The 5-minute deadline expired with a silence so heavy it felt like the entire base was holding its breath. General Vask raised one hand, ready to give the order to advance. "Your time has run out, Colonel. Compliance was the easier choice." Colonel Hayes didn't flinch. "We already made our choice, General. You just haven't seen it yet." Vask's hand dropped. The alien front line surged forward, weapons raised, their formation moving with terrifying discipline. But the moment they crossed the open field toward the base perimeter, the ground beneath them lit up with a controlled response that had been waiting patiently for exactly this moment. From the tree line, Sergeant Cole gave the order through his headset. Fire, coordinated rifle fire erupted from multiple positions at once, striking the alien front line from angles they hadn't accounted for. Their armor absorbed some of the impact, but not all of it. Soldiers staggered, several dropped entirely, and for the first time since landing, the alien ranks broke formation out of pure instinct. Overhead, the Black Hawk swept in low, forcing a second wave of alien soldiers to scatter toward the open field. Directly into the sightlines of soldiers who had been waiting in perfect position the entire time. "They're not holding formation," Whitman reported from his position near the command post. "They weren't ready for return fire this coordinated." Colonel Hayes moved quickly but calmly toward a secondary command point, watching the battlefield unfold exactly as planned. Though far from finished, "Keep the pressure controlled. We're not here to wipe them out. We're here to make them leave." Near the motor pool, Corporal Reeves and Private Holt found themselves face to face with 2 alien soldiers who had broken off from the main formation, clearly disoriented by the sudden resistance. "Cover," Reeves shouted, pulling Holt behind an armored vehicle just as an energy blast tore through the space they had been standing in seconds earlier. Holt fired back around the edge of the vehicle, striking one alien soldier square in the chest plate. The soldier staggered, but didn't fall, armor absorbing most of the impact. "Aim for the joints," Reeves shouted. "Their armor's weakest where it bends." Holt adjusted his aim and fired again, this time catching the alien soldier at the shoulder joint. The soldier dropped his weapon, clutching the wound, before Reeves closed the distance and disarmed him completely. Across the field, General Vask watched his forces falter with growing disbelief. "Impossible," he muttered. "This world had no advanced defenses in our scans." Commander Threck, standing beside him, looked equally shaken. "General, their coordination suggests extensive prior training. This is not primitive resistance." "No," Vask said slowly, realization creeping into his voice. "This is something else entirely." Colonel Hayes' voice carried clearly across the open comm channel, calm despite the chaos surrounding him. "General Vask, you still have a choice. Withdraw your forces now, and this ends without further losses on either side." Vask hesitated, watching his soldiers pull back instinctively from positions they had expected to hold with ease. Around him, the battlefield had transformed from an easy conquest into a controlled, methodical defense that refused to break no matter how much pressure his forces applied. Near the eastern perimeter, Sergeant Cole and his squad advanced carefully, pushing a group of alien soldiers back toward their landing ships without a single unnecessary shot fired. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, exactly as they had trained for years to execute. "They're falling back toward their ships," Cole reported. No signs of reinforcement incoming. In the command post, Major Grant confirmed the same. "Sir, their remaining forces are consolidating. No additional ships detected in orbit." "Whatever backup they might have called, it isn't here yet." Colonel Hayes allowed himself a brief moment of calculation before responding. "Then we press just enough to make sure they understand this fight isn't winnable, but we don't push them into desperation. Controlled pressure only." General Vask, watching his forces retreat further, finally turned to face Colonel Hayes directly across the battlefield, voice tight with barely restrained frustration. "You call this defense," Vask said. "This is not the behavior of a primitive world." "No," Hayes replied evenly. "It's the behavior of soldiers who trained their entire lives for exactly this kind of moment, whether they ever expected to face it or not." Vask's grip tightened around his weapon. Torn between the order to press forward and the growing realization that continuing this fight might cost him more than his mission was worth. Somewhere behind him, one of his officers shouted a warning about incoming movement from the northern tree line, a fresh wave of soldiers Colonel Hayes had kept in reserve the entire time. And as General Vask turned to assess this new threat, the battlefield shifted once again, tightening around his forces from every direction at once. The fight was far from over. But for the first time since landing, General Vask understood exactly how badly he had underestimated the people standing in front of him. The reserve unit moved in fast and disciplined, closing the gap around the alien position from the north exactly as Colonel Hayes had planned from the very first minute of the standoff. General Vask, watching his forces caught between two fronts, finally understood the trap he had walked into hours earlier without realizing it. "Pull back to the ships," Vask ordered, his voice sharp now, stripped of the earlier mockery. "Full retreat." Commander Threck hesitated. "General, retreat now signals weakness to the Dominion Council. Staying here signals death," Vask snapped. "Move." Alien soldiers began falling back in controlled but urgent formation, covering each other as they retreated toward the landing ships still hovering at the edge of the field. Colonel Hayes watched the retreat begin, giving one final order through his radio. "Let them go. No pursuit past the tree line." "We wanted them gone, not destroyed." Near the motor pool, Reeves and Holt watched the retreating soldiers pass close by, weapons still raised but not firing. "They're actually leaving," Holt said, almost in disbelief. "Told you," Reeves replied. "Nobody wins a fight against people who already know every inch of their own backyard." General Vask reached the ramp of his lead ship. Pausing for one final look back at the base that had dismantled his entire operation in under an hour. Colonel Hayes stood in the open field, unmoving, watching him leave with the same calm expression he'd carried since the ships first appeared. "This is not finished, Colonel," Vask called out, voice carrying across the distance one last time. "Maybe not," Hayes replied. "But if you come back, you already know what's waiting for you." Vask disappeared into his ship without another word. Moments later, all three vessels lifted off the field, engines roaring as they climbed back into the sky and vanished into the clouds as quickly as they had arrived. Silence returned to Fort Bragg, but this time it carried a different weight. the quiet exhaustion of soldiers who had just faced something none of them had ever trained specifically for. And won anyway. Colonel Hayes lowered his radio slowly, allowing himself one long breath before turning back toward his command staff. "Status report," he said. "I want numbers on wounded damage assessments and anything unusual left behind on that field." Major Grant moved quickly to comply, already coordinating teams across the base. Whitman approached Hayes directly, expression unreadable but respectful. "Sir, for what it's worth, that was about as clean as a first-contact firefight could go." Hayes allowed a tired but genuine smile. "Nobody trains for aliens showing up on a Monday, Dale. We just trained for chaos in general. Turns out that covers more than we thought." Across the field, soldiers slowly began regrouping, checking on each other, securing the perimeter, and processing what had just happened in real time. Specialist Miller's voice crackled over the radio from the communications building. "Colonel, Pentagon is requesting a full briefing immediately. They also want to know if you need additional support inbound." Hayes considered that for a moment before responding. "Tell them the situation is contained for now, but we'll need a full debrief team out here as soon as possible." And Miller, good work keeping that line open the whole time. "Thank you, sir," as the base slowly shifted from combat readiness back toward controlled recovery. Whispers began spreading among the soldiers, some in disbelief, some already turning the events of the day into stories they knew they'd be telling for years. Near the tree line, Sergeant Cole gathered his squad, checking each soldier for injuries before allowing himself to process what had just happened. "Anybody want to explain to me how we just fought off an alien invasion before lunch?" Walsh asked, still catching his breath. Cole shook his head slowly. "Don't overthink it, Walsh. Just remember every bit of training you've ever had matters, even when the enemy looks like something out of a movie." Far above the base, the alien ships had already vanished from sight, leaving behind scorched patches of grass, a few pieces of abandoned equipment, and one very shaken Dominion general, who now understood exactly why this particular stretch of land had never been an easy target, even by accident. Colonel Hayes stood alone for a moment in the center of the field, looking up at the empty sky where the ships had disappeared. He knew this wasn't truly over. A retreat wasn't the same as a surrender, and somewhere out there, General Vask would be reporting back to a much larger power, one that now had real data on exactly what humanity was capable of. But for today, Fort Bragg had held its ground. And as Hayes turned back toward his waiting staff, already preparing for the long process of reports, briefings, and whatever came next, one thought settled clearly in his mind. Whatever came back through that sky in the future, they would be ready for it too. By nightfall, Fort Bragg looked almost normal again, except for the scorched patches of grass near the training fields and the steady stream of vehicles moving equipment and personnel in careful, deliberate patterns. Word of what happened had already spread far beyond the base, but the full picture remained locked behind classified briefings and careful, controlled statements. Inside the command building, Colonel Hayes sat across from a secure video briefing with senior officials from the Pentagon, walking them through every detail of the encounter with the same calm precision he had used throughout the entire event. "To summarize," Hayes said, "hostile forces landed with clear intent to claim this location. Standard defensive protocols, combined with rapid tactical repositioning, were enough to convince them withdrawal was the safer option. We sustained minor injuries, no fatalities, and minimal structural damage." A senior official on the other end leaned forward. "Colonel, based on your report, it sounds like their technology significantly outmatched conventional expectations. Yet your forces still managed to force a full retreat." "They underestimated us," Hayes said simply. "They assumed advanced technology alone would guarantee an easy victory. They didn't account for trained soldiers who understood terrain, coordination, and patience better than any scanner could measure." The briefing continued for another hour, covering logistics, potential future threats, and recommendations for base-wide readiness updates. By the time it ended, Hayes finally allowed himself a moment to step outside and breathe in the cool evening air. Near the mess hall, soldiers gathered in small groups, quietly processing the day's events over late dinners. Corporal Reeves and Private Holt sat near the end of one table, still replaying the moment the car alarm sent 2 alien soldiers stumbling backward. "I'm telling you," Holt said, grinning despite his exhaustion, "that's going in my report exactly like it happened." Reeves shook his head, smiling. "Nobody's going to believe an alien invasion got interrupted by a Humvee alarm. Doesn't matter if they believe it," Holt replied. It happened. A few tables over, Sergeant Cole sat with his squad, going over small details of the engagement with the same careful focus he brought to every debrief. Though even he allowed a rare moment of quiet satisfaction. "You did good today, Walsh," Cole said. "First real contact and you held your position the whole time." Walsh nodded, still processing everything. "Sarge, do you think they're coming back?" Cole considered the question honestly before answering. "Maybe, probably, but if they do, we'll be ready the same way we were ready today." That's the job. Across the base, Specialist Miller remained in the communications building long after her shift technically ended, helping coordinate the flow of information between Fort Bragg and higher command. She had spent the entire encounter as the quiet, steady link between chaos on the ground and decision-makers hundreds of miles away. And she felt the weight of that responsibility settle now that the adrenaline had faded. Master Sergeant Whitman found her there, offering a rare compliment. "You kept that line open the whole time, Miller." Command's already flagging your performance for commendation. Miller allowed herself a tired smile. "Just doing the job, Sergeant. That's usually when people do it best," Whitman replied. Later that night, Colonel Hayes walked the perimeter of the base alone, taking in the quiet after a day that had tested every ounce of training, discipline, and composure his soldiers possessed. He paused near the edge of the training field, where General Vask had once stood with such absolute confidence, mocking a world he assumed would fall without resistance. Hayes looked up at the clear night sky, stars scattered peacefully above him, giving no hint of the danger that had appeared there just hours earlier. He thought about General Vask's final words before retreating, the promise that this wasn't finished. Hayes didn't doubt that for a second. Whatever power stood behind that Dominion Council would eventually receive a full report, detailing exactly how badly their expectations had been shattered by a single military installation on a planet they assumed would offer no real resistance. But if they came back, Hayes knew exactly what they would find waiting for them. Not a base caught off guard, not soldiers underestimating the threat in front of them. A garrison that had already proven, in the span of a single Monday morning, that assumptions about easy conquest could collapse the moment they met real training, real coordination, and real people who refused to back down. As he made his way back toward the command building, radios crackled quietly around him, base personnel settling into the long process of after-action reports, equipment checks, and the slow return to normal routine. Somewhere far above the clouds, General Vask's ships continued their journey back toward wherever they had come from, carrying data that would eventually reshape how an entire alien civilization viewed the planet they had once dismissed as primitive. And down below, Fort Bragg stood exactly as it always had, quiet, steady, and ready, waiting for whatever came next. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to drop a comment letting me know what part hit hardest for you. Share this video with someone who loves a good underdog story. And subscribe if you want to see what happens the next time something decides to test the wrong soldiers on the wrong Monday morning. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.
The lecture hall smelled like recycled air and lavender disinfectant, a combination that made Kira's stomach turn every single morning. She sat in the back row, shoulders hunched, fingers drumming against the synthetic wood of her desk while Professor Velis droned on about quantum mechanics and warp field theory. Around her, 200 students from 40 different species scribbled notes, tapped holographic keyboards, or simply existed in that unique state of academic boredom that transcended biology. Kira was human. The only human in the entire Galactic Academy on Station Zenith 7 that made her something between a curiosity and a liability, depending on who you asked. "Miss Chen, are you paying attention?" Professor Velis's voice cut through the monotony, his triocular gaze fixed on her from the podium. He was Velian, tall and spindly with skin that shimmered like oil on water. "Absolutely, Professor," Kira replied. not bothering to look up. "You were explaining how warp bubbles collapse under gravitational stress." "Riveting stuff," a few students tittered. Velas's middle eye narrowed, but he continued his lecture without further comment. Kira suppressed a grin. Small victory. Next to her sat Mira, a Quillen with 4 arms and an unfortunate habit of chewing on her stylus when nervous. She leaned closer, whispering through her translator, "You really should not antagonize him. Humans already have a reputation." "What reputation?" Mira muttered. "That we're loud, aggressive, emotionally unstable, all of those, yes." "Great. At least they're consistent." Mira's antenna twitched with what might have been amusement. Despite everything, she was one of the few beings on this station who treated Kira like an actual person instead of a walking disaster waiting to happen. Humans had only months ago, and the galaxy was still deciding whether that was a brilliant idea or a catastrophic mistake. Kira suspected most were leaning toward the latter. The morning crawled forward. Velas transitioned into discussing theoretical applications of faster-than-light communication, and Kira's mind drifted. She thought about Earth, about the smell of rain on pavement, about her younger brother's terrible jokes. She thought about how strange it was to be light years away from home, surrounded by beings who breathed different air and dreamed in colors she couldn't imagine. Then the alarm sounded. It wasn't the soft chime of a fire drill or the polite buzz of a schedule change. This was a screaming, bone-rattling wail that turned the recycled air into pure adrenaline. Red emergency lights flooded the hall, casting everything in shades of blood and shadow. Kira's desk cracked. She looked down and realized her hands were gripping the edges so hard the synthetic material had splintered beneath her fingers. Splinters from a desk designed to withstand the weight of species 3 times her size. Around her, chaos erupted. Students screamed, scrambled, knocked over chairs in their panic. Professor Velas was shouting something about orderly evacuation, but his voice was lost in the cacophony. Mira grabbed Kira's arm with 2 of her hands, eyes wide with terror. "What is happening?" Kira didn't answer. She couldn't. Her heart was hammering so hard it felt like it might burst through her ribs, and every muscle in her body had gone rigid. This wasn't fear. This was something older, something written into her DNA by a billion years of evolution on a planet that had tried very, very hard to kill her ancestors. The station's automated voice cut through the noise, cold and mechanical. "Alert. Hostile forces detected. All personnel proceed to designated shelters. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Hostile forces. Invasion." Kira stood, shoving her chair back so hard it flew across the aisle and clattered against the wall. Students nearby flinched away from her, and she realized she was breathing hard. Nostrils flared, every sense suddenly razor-sharp. Mira's voice was small, frightened. "Get to the shelters," Kira said, her voice coming out rougher than intended. "Now, what about you? I'll be right behind you." That was a lie, and they both knew it. The lecture hall emptied in a stampede of limbs and wings and appendages Kira didn't have names for. She waited until the last student had fled, then turned and sprinted in the opposite direction. Not toward the shelters, toward the observation deck she needed to see. The corridors of Zenith 7 were a maze of gleaming metal and soft lighting, designed to be calming and efficient. Now they were a war zone. Emergency teams rushed past her, shouting orders in a dozen languages. A Kree engineer nearly collided with her, his exoskeleton clattering as he adjusted course. "Wrong way, human," he barked. Kira ignored him. The observation deck was supposed to be off-limits during emergencies, but the door slid open when she swiped her student ID. Apparently, the station's security protocols hadn't accounted for someone stupid enough to run toward danger. She stepped inside and her breath caught. Through the massive, transparent dome, space stretched out in every direction. Beautiful, infinite, and currently filled with ships. Not galactic community ships. These were angular, brutal things, all sharp edges and glowing weapons arrays. They moved with predatory grace, circling Zenith 7 like sharks scenting blood. Kira counted 12. No, 15. Maybe more emerging from behind the station's curve. Her hands clenched into fists. "Zurathians," a voice said behind her. Kira spun. A woman stood in the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, with close-cropped black hair and eyes that had seen too much. She wore the insignia of station security, lieutenant's bars on her collar. "Commander Hayes," Kira breathed. Commander Sarah Hayes was the only other human on Zenith 7, a career officer who'd been assigned here as part of Earth's diplomatic contingent. Kira had seen her exactly twice before, both times from a distance. "You should be in a shelter, Cadet," Hayes said, but there was no heat in her words. She moved to stand beside Kira, staring out at the enemy fleet. "So should you." Hayes's mouth twitched. "Probably." They stood in silence for a moment, watching as the Zerathian ships tightened their formation. Energy signatures bloomed across Kira's vision, weapons charging. "They're going to attack," Kira said quietly. "Yes." "Can the station defend itself?" Hayes was quiet for a long moment. The defensive grid was designed to repel pirates and small raiding parties, not a full battle fleet. She paused. "We've sent a distress signal. Help is coming, but it'll take hours, maybe days. And Zenith 7 won't last that long." "No, it won't." Kira's jaw tightened. "Then we need to buy time." Ace turned to look at her, really look at her, and something shifted in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. "You know what they call us, don't you? Out there in the galaxy. What the other species whisper when they think we can't hear." "Deathworlders," Kira said. "Deathworlders," Hayes echoed. "Because Earth tried to kill us for millions of years and we refused to die. Because we evolved in gravity that would crush half the species in this station. Because our immune systems treat biological warfare like a minor inconvenience. Because we are, by every measurable standard, absolutely terrifying." "Your point?" Hayes's smile was sharp enough to cut. "My point, Cadet, is that those Zerathian bastards are about to learn why you don't invade a station with humans on it." The first weapon struck the station's shields, and the deck shuddered beneath their feet. Alarms wailed. The lights flickered. Kira felt something unlock inside her chest, something she'd been keeping carefully contained since the moment she'd arrived at this station. The other students were fragile. The professors were cautious. Everyone walked on eggshells around her, afraid she might snap, might lash out, might prove every terrible stereotype about humans true. She'd been so careful, so controlled, but now there was an enemy. Now there was a threat. Now she could let go. "What do you need me to do?" Kira asked. Hayes pulled a sidearm from her holster and offered it handle first. "First, arm yourself. Second, follow me. We're going to show these xenocidal pricks what happens when you pick a fight with Earth." Kira took the weapon. It was heavy, solid, real. Her fingers wrapped around the grip like they'd been made for it. More impacts rocked the station. The shields were failing. Somewhere in the distance, metal screamed as hull plates buckled. "Commander," Kira said as they moved toward the exit, "I should probably mention I've never actually fired a gun before." Hayes laughed, wild and fierce. "Don't worry, humans are natural-born killers, Chin. It's in your blood. You'll figure it out." They ran. The corridors had transformed into a nightmare. Emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red. Smoke billowed from damaged systems. A section of wall had collapsed, revealing sparking wires and hissing pipes. Bodies lay scattered, some moving, some not. Kira's training should have kicked in. First aid, triage, help the wounded. But Hayes was already past them, moving with military precision, and something in Kira's gut told her that stopping now would doom everyone. The only way to save these people was to stop the attack. They reached an emergency lift. Hayes jammed her security card into the reader and the doors hissed open. "Where are we going?" Kira demanded as they descended. "Hangar Bay. The station has a small complement of defense fighters, but they're not armed." Not officially. Not officially." Hayes's grin was vicious. "I may have acquired certain weapon systems during my time in the Navy. Kept them in storage. Just in case. You smuggled military-grade weapons onto an educational station." "Yep. That's incredibly illegal. Also incredibly useful right now, wouldn't you say?" Kira couldn't argue with that. The lift doors opened onto chaos. The hangar bay was enormous, designed to accommodate everything from cargo haulers to diplomatic shuttles. Right now it was filling with smoke and panicked personnel. A Zerathian breaching pod had punched through the outer hull, and armored soldiers were pouring out, weapons blazing. Hayes drew her sidearm and fired 3 shots, so fast they sounded like one. 3 Zerathian soldiers dropped. Holes burned through their helmets. "Move!" Hayes shouted. They sprinted across the bay, using cargo containers for cover as energy bolts sizzled past them. Kira's heart was trying to pound its way out of her chest, but her hands were steady, almost eerily steady. A Zarathian soldier stepped out from behind a shuttle, weapon raised. Kira didn't think. She raised her sidearm and pulled the trigger. The recoil surprised her. The accuracy didn't. The shot took the soldier square in the chest and he went down hard. Hayes glanced at her. Not bad for a first-timer. Thanks, I'm terrified. Good. Fear keeps you alive. They reached a secured storage unit at the far end of the bay. Hayes pressed her palm against the biometric lock and the door slid open, revealing racks of weapons, ammunition, and what looked like modified fighter armaments. Grab what you can carry, Hayes ordered. We're loading up 2 fighters, and we're going out there, into space, against a full battle fleet. You got a better idea? Kira looked at the weapons. Then back toward the hangar where more Zarathian soldiers were establishing a beachhead. She thought about Mira terrified and hiding in a shelter. About Professor Velis and his insufferable lectures. About 200 students who were just trying to learn and grow and maybe make the galaxy a little bit better. No, she said. I really don't. They loaded the fighters in 4 minutes flat, working with a synchronization that felt almost supernatural. Maybe it was adrenaline. Maybe it was something deeper, some shared human instinct for violence that the rest of the galaxy feared. Kira climbed into the cockpit of a sleek Raven-class fighter, her hands finding the controls with surprising ease. The neural interface synced with her implant, and suddenly the ship felt like an extension of her body. You ever flown before? Hayes asked over the comm. Simulator training. Nothing real. Well, congratulations on your graduation. Try not to die. The hangar doors were damaged, stuck half open. Hayes blasted them the rest of the way with her fighters' forward guns, and then they were launching, shooting out into the black. Space combat was nothing like the simulators. It was faster, more disorienting, more viscerally terrifying. Zarathian fighters swarmed around them immediately, weapons blazing. Kira banked hard, instinct guiding her, and felt laser fire miss her hull by meters. She returned fire, watched with grim satisfaction as one of the enemy fighters exploded into debris. Not bad, Chen, Hayes shouted. Stick with me. They dove toward the Zarathian capital ship, 2 tiny fighters against a vessel the size of a city block. It was suicide. It was insane. It was working. The Zarathians hadn't expected resistance. Their fighters were scrambling to intercept, but Hayes and Kira were already past them, streaking toward the capital ship's exposed underbelly. Targeting the reactor core, Hayes said, her voice tight with concentration. When I give the signal, fire everything you've got. Kira's hands tightened on the controls. Copy that. They were so close now she could see individual hull plates, could see crew members moving behind reinforced windows. Now, Hayes screamed. Kira fired. Every weapon, every missile, everything. The capital ship's reactor didn't just explode. It tore itself apart from the inside out, a chain reaction of catastrophic failures that turned the entire vessel into a miniature sun. The shockwave hit Kira's fighter like a physical blow, sending her spinning end over end. Alarms shrieked. Her vision went white. When her sight cleared, the Zarathian fleet was in full retreat, scattering like startled fish. Hayes? Kira gasped. Commander Hayes, do you copy? Static. Then, faint and crackling. I copy. Still alive. Mostly. Kira let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. They'd done it. Against all odds, against every reasonable expectation, they'd actually done it. She guided her damaged fighter back toward Zenith 7, watching as station security moved to secure the hangar bay, as medical teams rushed to help the wounded. She'd saved them. She'd actually saved them. The fighter touched down roughly, and Kira practically fell out of the cockpit. Her legs were shaking. Her hands were shaking. Everything was shaking. Hayes appeared beside her, blood running down one side of her face from a cut above her eye, grinning like a maniac. Welcome to the war, cadet, she said. Kira opened her mouth to respond. That's when the second invasion fleet dropped out of warp, twice the size of the first, and every weapon trained on the station. The comm systems exploded with panicked voices. Station command was shouting evacuation protocols. Defense coordinators were screaming about insufficient firepower. Someone was praying in a language Kira didn't recognize. Commander Hayes grabbed Kira's shoulder hard enough to bruise. You get back in that fighter. Now, they'll slaughter us, Kira said, but she was already moving. Her body had disconnected from her brain, running on pure survival instinct. There's no way two fighters can take on that many ships. Then we don't take them on. We buy time. Hayes was climbing back into her cockpit, blood still streaming down her face. The distress signal went out. Galactic Defense Forces en route. We just need to keep this station in one piece until they arrive. How long? 40 minutes. 40 minutes. An eternity in combat. A blink in any other context. Kira sealed herself into her fighter, felt the neural interface reconnect. The ship's systems were damaged but functional. Barely, she had maybe 60% weapon capacity, and the shields were operating at a fraction of their normal strength. Through the cockpit canopy, she watched the second Zarathian fleet arrange itself in an attack formation. These ships were larger, more heavily armed. The smaller craft that had retreated earlier were regrouping with them, doubling their fighter complement. They're really committed to destroying this place, Kira muttered. Zenith 7 is the premier research and education facility in this sector, Hayes replied through the comm. 40 species represented, thousands of the brightest minds in the galaxy. They're not trying to conquer it, Chen. They're trying to send a message. What message? That the galactic community is weak, that we can't protect our own, that unity is a fantasy. His voice went cold. The Zarathians have been isolationists for 3 centuries. Now they're making a play for dominance, and this is their opening move. The lead Zarathian vessel powered up its main cannon. Energy readings spiked across Kira's display, climbing higher and higher. That's a planetary assault weapon, Hayes said quietly. One shot will crack this station like an egg. Then we stop them from firing. With what? Harsh language. Kora's mind raced. 2 fighters. Damaged fighters. Against a fleet that could atomize them without effort. The math was impossible. The situation was hopeless. Humans specialized in hopeless. Commander, what's the one thing every species in the galaxy agrees about humans? Hayes was silent for a moment. Then she laughed, sharp and bitter. That we're insane. Exactly. So let's prove them right. Kira opened a channel to the Zarathian fleet. She had no idea if they'd even listen, but she had to try. Zarathian vessels. This is Cadet Kira Chen of Earth. You are in violation of galactic community law. Withdraw immediately or face consequences. The response came 30 seconds later, translated through her ship's computer. The voice was cold, mechanical, utterly without mercy. Earth, the species that believes itself equal to civilizations millennia old. You are irrelevant. Your warning is irrelevant. Prepare for annihilation. Irrelevant. Kira repeated. That's their mistake right there. She plotted a course directly toward the lead vessel, the one charging its planet killer. Commander, I need you to hit their sensor array. Blind them. Just for a few seconds. And then what? Then I'm going to do something incredibly stupid. Kira, wait. But Kira was already accelerating, pushing her damaged fighter to maximum burn. The Zarathian fleet opened fire, and space around her became a lattice of death. Energy bolts and missiles filled the void, each one capable of vaporizing her ship. She dodged. Not through skill, not through training, through something deeper, something her body knew before her mind caught up. Earth gravity was crushing compared to most worlds. Earth predators had been fast and deadly. Humans had survived by being faster, smarter, more adaptable. Kira's ancestors had dodged saber-toothed cats and cave bears. These energy bolts were just bigger teeth. Hayes' fighter streaked past, weapons blazing, and the Zarathian flagship's sensor array exploded in a shower of sparks and debris. For exactly 4.3 seconds, the massive ship was blind. Kira used every one of those seconds. She dove beneath the flagship's ventral hull, so close she could have reached out and touched the metal if not for the canopy. Targeting systems locked onto the charging weapon's power coupling, the one weak point in its heavily armored structure. She fired everything. Missiles, lasers, kinetic rounds, everything. The coupling ruptured. Energy meant for the station backfed into the weapon itself, and Kira was already pulling up, pulling away, pushing her fighter past its maximum stress tolerances. The Zarathian flagship's main weapon exploded. Not the controlled detonation of a reactor breach, but a chaotic, violent failure that tore through internal systems like a cancer. Secondary explosions rippled across the hull. The ship began listing, life support failing, crew evacuating in escape pods. The rest of the fleet hesitated. Just for a moment. Just long enough. That's 2 capital ships, you arrogant bastards. Hayes snarled over the comm. You want a third? The Zarathians did not in fact want a third. Their formation broke, ships peeling away, fighters retreating to defensive positions, but they didn't leave. They regrouped, recalculated, prepared for a second assault. Kira's fighter limped back toward the station, systems failing one by one. Red lights covered her dashboard. The neural interface was screaming warnings directly into her brain. "Chen, your ship's falling apart," Hayes said. "I noticed. Get back to the hangar. You're done." Not yet, because she'd seen something. A pattern in the Zarathian formation, a gap in their defensive screen, and 37 minutes left until reinforcements arrived. She changed course, vectoring not toward the station but toward the enemy fleet's left flank. 3 heavy cruisers hung there, weapons charging, prepared to pound Zenith 7 into scrap metal. "Kira, what are you doing?" "Buying time. You'll die, probably." She thought about Mira hiding in some shelter, wondering if her sarcastic human friend was still alive. About her brother back on Earth, who'd cried when she left for the academy. About Professor Velis and his boring lectures that she'd never complain about again if she survived this. About the 200 students who deserved to live. Her fighter was screaming now, every system on the verge of catastrophic failure. She aimed for the gap between the cruisers, threading the needle at speeds that would turn her into paste if she hit anything solid. The Zarathians saw her coming. They fired. She dodged. Not all of it. One energy bolt clipped her starboard wing, tearing it half off. Her fighter began spiraling, centrifugal force trying to pull her apart. Kira roared, fighting the controls, forcing the dying ship to obey her will. She wasn't religious, but in that moment she prayed to whatever gods might listen. Human gods, alien gods, the cold mathematics of physics itself. The fighter stabilized. Barely. She was inside their formation now, past their heaviest defenses, and she had exactly 1 missile left. 1 shot. 1 chance. The lead cruiser's bridge was directly ahead, command staff visible through reinforced windows. She could see their faces. Alien features twisted in shock and rage. They hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected someone to be this reckless, this desperate, this human. "For Earth," Kira whispered and fired. The missile struck the bridge dead center. The explosion was relatively small, contained, but it severed the cruiser's command structure. Without leadership, its automated systems went into defensive mode. Weapons powering down, engines reducing to station-keeping burns. The other 2 cruisers broke formation, scrambling to compensate, and then the cavalry arrived. Warp signatures bloomed across Kira's sensors. Massive signatures. The Galactic Defense Force dropping into real space in perfect formation. 12 dreadnoughts, 50 destroyers, hundreds of fighters. The Zarathian fleet didn't wait to engage. They jumped to warp in seconds, abandoning their damaged ships, fleeing into the deep black. Kira's fighter finally gave up the ghost. Systems died. Life support failed. She was coasting now, drifting in vacuum, trapped in a metal coffin. "Chen." Hayes' voice crackled through the dying comm system. "Kira, respond." She tried. Her mouth wouldn't work. Everything hurt. She was pretty sure she had at least 3 broken ribs and possibly a concussion. The cockpit was getting cold. Really cold. "Rescue teams are en route," Hayes was saying, but her voice sounded distant. "Hang on, cadet. That's an order. Hang on." Kira's eyes drifted closed. She'd done it. They'd won. Everyone would be okay. That was good. That was enough. When she woke up, she was in medical bay, wrapped in more bandages than she'd thought possible. Every breath hurt. Moving was out of the question. But she was alive. Mira was sitting beside her bed, all 4 hands wringing together nervously. When she saw Kira's eyes open, she made a sound that the translator rendered as relieved sobbing. "You complete idiot," Mira said, which wasn't what Kira expected. "You beautiful, insane, terrifying idiot." "Hey," Kira croaked. "I saved everyone." "Yes, by nearly dying multiple times." Mira leaned forward, antenna trembling. "Every species in this station is talking about you. About Commander Hayes. About what humans can do when threatened. Are they scared? Absolutely terrified. And also grateful. It is a confusing combination." Kira managed a weak laugh that turned into a cough. "Where's Hayes?" "Giving reports to Galactic Command. She has been arguing with them for 6 hours about military protocols and rules of engagement. I believe she may have used several Earth profanities that the translators cannot process." "That sounds like her." The door slid open and Professor Velis entered, moving with the careful dignity of his species. He stopped at the foot of Kira's bed, three eyes studying her. "Miss Chen," he said formally, "I have been asked to deliver a message from the Academy Council." Here it comes, Kira thought. Expulsion for recklessness, criminal charges for taking military action, deportation back to Earth. The Council wishes to extend their deepest gratitude for your actions during the attack, Velis continued. Furthermore, they have unanimously voted to create a new position, Head of Emergency Response and Combat Protocols. The position is yours, should you choose to accept it. Kira stared. "I'm a student. I split a desk in half this morning because I got startled." "Yes," Velis said, and his tone was almost warm. "And when the alarm sounded, when everyone else panicked, you acted. You understood that violence, controlled and directed, is sometimes the only answer to violence. The galaxy needs individuals who understand this, individuals who can protect the rest of us when negotiation fails." He paused, then added more quietly, "I apologize, Miss Chen, for treating you as a potential danger rather than a potential defender. It was small-minded of me." "It's okay," Kira said. "I kind of am a danger to our enemies." "Yes, we are beginning to appreciate the distinction." After he left, Mira squeezed Kira's hand gently. "So, you are famous now. The human who saved Zenith 7. How does it feel?" "Painful," Kira admitted. "Everything hurts. That is very human of you. To save everyone and then complain about the consequences. Complaining is also very human." "This is true." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Through the medical bay window, Kira could see Zenith 7's curve, could see repair crews already working on the damaged sections. Life continuing. Learning continuing. Because of what she'd done, because of what Hayes had done. Because humans, when pushed back harder. Commander Hayes appeared in the doorway several hours later, looking exhausted but satisfied. She'd cleaned up, changed uniforms, and the cut above her eye was sealed with medical adhesive. "Cadet Chen," she said formally. Then she grinned. "Or should I say, Head of Emergency Response. I haven't accepted yet." "You will." Hayes pulled up a chair, sitting with the careful posture of someone whose body had also been through hell. "Because you're a fighter, Kira. Because when the alarm sounded and everyone else ran toward safety, you ran toward the fight. That's not training. Maybe it's a bad instinct. Maybe. But it's the instinct that kept humanity alive on Earth. And it's the instinct that's going to keep the galactic community alive now." Kira thought about that. About her broken desk and her reputation and the weight of expectation that had been crushing her since she arrived at this station. About how in the moment of actual crisis that weight had transformed into purpose. "The galaxy's still afraid of us," she said. "Good. Let them be afraid. Fear keeps people honest." Hayes leaned back, "But they're also grateful. And gratitude builds trust. And trust, given enough time, builds understanding." "You sound optimistic." "I sound realistic. Humans aren't saints, Kira. We're violent, aggressive, emotionally unstable deathworlders from a nightmare planet. But we're also loyal, courageous, and we don't abandon our own. The galaxy needs to learn that we're both the monster under the bed and the guardian at the door, sometimes simultaneously." Kira looked at her hands, at the bandages covering knuckles that had gripped a fighter's controls so hard she'd bruised bone, at fingers that had pulled a trigger without hesitation when lives were at stake. "I split my desk in half," she said quietly, "just from grabbing it when the alarm went off. I know. It's already a meme on the station network. Someone made an animation. Oh God, it's actually pretty funny, you should see it. Despite everything." Kira laughed. It hurt, but it was worth it. The door opened again and a junior medical officer entered, some species Kira didn't recognize, holding a datapad. "Excuse me, Head Chen, there are 63 media requests for interviews, 27 academic journals, asking for articles, and apparently the entire freshman class wants your autograph." Kira looked at Hayes helplessly. Hayes was trying not to laugh. "Tell them," Kira said carefully, "that I'm just a student who got lucky. And that any credit belongs to Commander Hayes as much as me." "Already told them that," Hayes said. "They didn't believe me. Humans apparently make good heroes, or good monsters, like I said. Sometimes both." The medical officer left, looking vaguely confused by human humor. Mira had fallen asleep in her chair, exhausted by stress and relief. Outside, the stars wheeled slowly past, infinite and ancient. Kira closed her eyes, letting exhaustion pull her back towards sleep. She dreamed of Earth, of rain and gravity, and a world that had tried so hard to kill her species. She dreamed of space combat and enemy fleets, and the cold mathematics of survival. She dreamed of her desk splitting beneath her fingers, and understood finally what it meant. Not that she was dangerous, not that she needed to be contained or controlled or feared, but that she was strong, that humanity was strong, that when the alarm sounded and the invasion came and the galaxy needed protection, humans would be there, raking desks, raking enemy ships, breaking expectations, being exactly what they'd always been. Survivors, fighters, heroes and monsters and everything in between. When she woke again, Zenith 7 was whole, the students were returning to class, and Professor Velis was posting new lecture notes about applied combat physics. Kira smiled, closed her eyes, and let herself rest. The galaxy could wait. She'd already saved it once today. Tomorrow, when the alarm inevitably sounded again, she'd save it again. That's what humans did. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.
If you ever mistake a quiet human for a weak one, make sure you are standing somewhere you can still walk away from. Nobody in the Arc Valorum Academy cafeteria remembered who whispered those words first. They only remembered what happened a few seconds later. Lunch trays rattled. Conversations faded. Hundreds of students from dozens of worlds suddenly stopped talking as Kale Vorik rose from his chair with the slow confidence of someone who had never been told no. Standing well over 7 feet tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing the silver crest of one of the oldest Varkan military families, he did not need to raise his voice. The room always made space for him. Across the cafeteria, Claire Whitaker barely noticed. She sat alone near the windows, her faded gray hoodie pulled over a simple blue t-shirt with the outline of Earth printed across the front. She quietly unwrapped her turkey sandwich, opened a small bag of potato chips, and took the first bite of her lunch. To everyone else, she looked exactly like what they expected a 17-year-old human exchange student to look like. Small, ordinary, forgettable. Kale crossed the room without rushing. 2 of his friends followed several feet behind, already smiling because they assumed they knew how the next few minutes would end. One of them nudged another student aside with a shoulder. Nobody protested. Nobody ever did. Kale stopped beside Claire's table and looked down at her as if she had wandered into the wrong building by accident. "You picked my seat," he said. Claire looked around before realizing he was talking to her. She swallowed, folded the wrapper from her sandwich, and answered with a calm voice that sounded almost apologetic. "There are plenty of empty tables." A few nearby students exchanged nervous looks. That was not the answer they expected. Kale smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. There were. He reached down, picked up Claire's lunch tray with one hand, and set it onto the neighboring table hard enough for her drink to tip over. Soda spread across the surface, dripping onto the floor. The cafeteria remained completely silent. Claire stared at the spilled drink for a second before reaching into her backpack for a napkin. She carefully wiped her sleeve where a few drops had landed. She did not glare. She did not argue. She did not even sigh. Kale laughed. "I heard humans came from a death world." Claire nodded once. "We do." "Funny," Kale continued. "I expected something tougher." His friends chuckled. Someone farther back quietly looked away, pretending to be interested in their tablet instead. Claire finished wiping her sleeve and placed the used napkin beside the tray. Then she looked up at Kale for the first time. Her blue eyes were steady, almost tired. "You should stop now," she said. Not a threat, not a challenge, just a simple sentence. Kale leaned closer. "Or what?" Claire glanced around the cafeteria. She noticed the frightened first-year students, the instructors who had not arrived yet, the emergency exits, the security cameras. Then she looked back at him. "Because this doesn't have to become the worst decision you make today." Kale laughed so loudly the sound echoed across the room. "Did everyone hear that? The little human thinks she's warning me." More laughter followed, but not from everyone. Sitting several tables away, Princess Leora Sale slowly lowered the datapad she had been reading. She had been watching Claire since the exchange students arrived 3 weeks earlier. Something about the girl's voice had never matched her reputation. There was no panic in it, no anger, only restraint. Leora noticed something else. Claire's hands were completely still, not because she was frozen with fear, because she had trained herself to keep them that way. Cale never noticed. He reached toward Claire's backpack, grabbed the small keychain shaped like Earth hanging from the zipper, and held it between two fingers. "This little rock means that much to you?" he asked with a grin. Claire stood up slowly. She was almost a foot shorter than him, yet she never stepped backward. "Please put it back," she said quietly. Cale twirled the keychain once before letting it dangle from his hand. "Make me." Somewhere behind them, a lunch tray slipped from someone's hands and hit the floor with a loud metallic clang. Nobody flinched except the students who did not know Claire. The ones who had grown up around Deathworlders suddenly stopped smiling. They had heard stories passed down from explorers and rescue crews. Stories about humans who stayed calm, right until the moment calm was no longer necessary. Claire looked at the little blue globe hanging from Cale's fingers. For just a heartbeat, something behind her eyes changed. Not rage, not fear, recognition. As if a line she had spent years trying not to cross had just appeared directly in front of her. Cale held the little Earth keychain just above Claire's reach, waiting for the frightened reaction that always came when he cornered someone. It never arrived. Claire simply looked at the tiny blue planet swinging from his fingers, then quietly took a slow breath. The silence became uncomfortable. Even Cale's friends stopped laughing because they could not understand why the human girl was not embarrassed. She looked disappointed. Before anyone could say another word, the cafeteria door slid open and Professor Helena Brooks stepped inside, carrying a stack of digital lesson tablets. She had been the first human faculty member invited to teach at Arc Valorum Academy after spending 20 years working as a cultural liaison between Earth and the Galactic Council. Her eyes immediately landed on the crowd gathered around Claire's table. "Everyone back to your seats," she called out. "Lunch ends in 3 minutes." Cale casually tossed the keychain onto the table as if nothing had happened. "We were just welcoming the new student." Professor Brooks looked from the spilled drink to Claire's soaked sleeve. "That is not what it looks like." Cale shrugged. "Accidents happen." Claire picked up the little Earth keychain and clipped it back onto her backpack without saying a word. Professor Brooks waited for her to speak, but Claire only nodded once. "I am fine." The answer surprised everyone except Brooks. She had heard those exact words from human search and rescue crews after hurricanes, wildfires, and collapsed buildings. Sometimes, "I am fine" simply meant there were more important problems to solve. As the students began leaving for afternoon classes, Princess Leora caught up with Claire in the hallway. "Why did you not report him?" she asked. Claire adjusted the strap on her backpack. "Because reporting him will not change him." "Then why tell him to stop?" Leora asked. Claire smiled faintly. "Because everyone deserves one chance to make a better choice." Leora frowned. "Only one." Claire looked through the tall glass windows overlooking the academy gardens where students from dozens of worlds walked together between classes. Sometimes people only need one. Sometimes they waste it. They continued walking in silence until they reached the Academy Transit Hall. Hundreds of students crossed the enormous corridor beneath banners representing every member world in the council. Claire slowed near the largest display, a polished holographic map showing every inhabited system. Earth appeared as a tiny blue dot near the edge of explored space. Several alien students walked by without even noticing it. Claire stopped for a second anyway. "You miss home," Leora said quietly. Claire nodded. "Every day." "Why come here?" Claire laughed softly. "Because my dad said fear gets smaller when you walk toward it." Leora tilted her head. "Your father sounds unusual. He fixes fences on our ranch, drinks too much black coffee, and thinks every problem can be solved with enough patience." Claire smiled at the memory. "He also told me something before my shuttle left Montana." "What did he say?" Claire looked at the tiny blue planet floating inside the hologram. "He said people are going to decide who you are before they ever ask your name. Do not spend your life trying to change their minds. Spend it making sure you do not become the person they expect." Leora remained quiet. The words sounded simple, but something inside them carried far more weight than Claire intended to show. Across the hall, Cale watched the conversation from the upper balcony. One of his friends leaned against the railing. "You let her walk away." Cale folded his arms. "She embarrassed herself." "Did she?" his friend asked. Cale did not answer immediately. For reasons he could not explain, the image that kept replaying in his mind was not Claire standing up to him. It was how completely calm she had remained. Nobody stayed that calm unless they were terrified, or unless they had already decided there was nothing left to prove. Cale convinced himself it was the first. Unfortunately for him, he had just made the same mistake almost everyone in the galaxy made the first time they met a human. The next few days settled into a strange routine that made Claire wonder if every school in the galaxy worked exactly the same way. Classes started on time. Assignments piled up. Teachers expected results. The only real difference was that some students had wings, some had scales, and one of them seemed determined to turn every hallway into another test. Cale never touched her again after the cafeteria. Instead, he became creative. During low-gravity athletics, someone quietly increased Claire's training lane from 1 Earth gravity to 1.3. Most students expected the human girl to stumble. Claire simply finished the course, breathing a little harder than usual before resetting the equipment to its proper setting without saying a word. During biology lab, her workstation somehow received twice the assignment samples everyone else did. She stayed 15 minutes after class, completed every report, and thanked the instructor before leaving. In the library, someone replaced her digital history files with children's learning books about primitive civilizations. Claire checked the catalog, borrowed the correct materials, and never complained. Every small prank left Cale more confused than satisfied. Does she even notice? One of his friends asked after watching Claire carry a stack of books across the central courtyard. Cale folded his arms. She notices. She is afraid to react. Across the courtyard, Claire found an empty bench beneath a tall crystal tree whose leaves reflected the afternoon sunlight in shifting shades of blue and silver. She opened her engineering textbook and tried to concentrate, but her thoughts drifted home. She missed Montana in ways she could never explain to people who had never seen an open sky without starships crossing it. She missed the smell of fresh-cut hay. She missed hearing the wind push across empty fields. Most of all, she missed dinner with her parents, where nobody cared about politics between planets or whether humans belonged in the council. Her communicator buzzed softly. The screen lit up with a familiar face. Her father smiled from the ranch kitchen, holding a coffee mug that looked almost too small in his weathered hands. "How is school, kiddo?" Claire smiled for the first time all day. "It is educational." He laughed. "That usually means something interesting happened." Claire hesitated. "Some people are making things difficult." Her father nodded as though he had expected that answer. "Are you safe?" "Yes." "Are you alone?" Claire glanced toward the busy courtyard where hundreds of students crossed between buildings. "Not really." "Then remember why you are there." Claire leaned back against the bench. "To prove humans belong." "No," he answered gently. "You are there to learn. If somebody else spends every day trying to prove they are bigger than you, let them waste their own time." Claire looked down at the Earth keychain resting against her backpack. What if they keep pushing? Her father took another sip of coffee before answering. "Patience is not the same thing as surrender. You know the difference." The call ended a minute later, but those words stayed with her through the rest of the afternoon. Unseen from the second-floor walkway, Princess Leora had watched nearly the entire conversation. She did not understand every human custom, but she recognized something unusual. Claire never spoke like someone carrying resentment. She spoke like someone carrying responsibility. That evening, Leora finally asked Professor Brooks a question that had been bothering her for weeks. Why does Claire never respond when people insult her? Professor Brooks smiled faintly without looking up from the reports on her desk. Because she was raised to believe that self-control is strongest before anyone notices it. Leora considered that answer carefully. Somewhere else on campus, Cale had reached a completely different conclusion. Every quiet reaction convinced him that Claire had finally accepted her place. He did not realize that each small test was teaching Claire something too. She was beginning to understand exactly who around her could be trusted, and exactly who could not. By the end of the first month, most students at Arc Valorum Academy had quietly placed Claire Whitaker into one of two categories. The ones who barely knew her assumed she was timid. The few who had actually spoken with her were no longer sure. Princess Leora found herself belonging to the second group. Their schedules overlapped almost every afternoon in Applied Systems Engineering, a class where students learned how different civilizations designed emergency infrastructure. While everyone else rushed to answer questions first, Claire always listened until every other voice had finished. She never interrupted. She never tried to impress anyone. Yet every time Professor Brooks asked the class to solve a practical problem, Claire's solutions worked with fewer moving parts than everyone else's. Why would you use manual release levers? One student asked during a simulation. Every modern station uses automated systems. Claire looked at the model for another second before answering. Because computers fail. Several students laughed. One raised a hand. Council systems almost never fail. Claire nodded politely. Almost never is still not never. Professor Brooks smiled, but said nothing. She had seen that kind of thinking before. It was common among people who had grown up where winter storms could cut electricity for days, and where solving problems with whatever happened to be nearby was simply part of life. After class, Leora caught up with Claire outside the engineering wing. You notice details nobody else notices, she said. Claire shrugged. My mother always told me to pay attention before speaking. No, Leora replied thoughtfully. It is more than that. She pointed toward the emergency exit beside them. You looked at that door 3 different times during class. Claire blinked. Did I? Yes. Leora folded her arms. And yesterday, you chose the seat closest to the hallway. The day before that, you stood where you could see both staircases. Even in the cafeteria, you never sit with your back to the room. Claire smiled awkwardly. You have been paying a lot of attention. Because you make no sense, Leora admitted. Everyone says humans are emotional, unpredictable, and reckless. You are none of those things. Claire leaned against the railing overlooking the academy gardens. Maybe everyone met the wrong humans. Leora studied her face for a long moment. Or maybe nobody met the real ones. Claire did not answer. A cool breeze drifted through the open courtyard, carrying the scent of flowering crystal vines. For a few peaceful seconds, neither of them spoke. Then a loud alarm echoed from the athletics building across campus. Students immediately began looking around in confusion before the announcement system calmly explained it had only been a maintenance test. Most conversations resumed almost instantly. Claire's did not. Leora noticed that during the first half-second of the alarm, Claire had instinctively stepped to one side, scanned the balconies, checked the nearest exits, and then relaxed only after identifying the source. The movement had been so natural that Claire herself seemed unaware she had done it. You trained for that, Leora said quietly. Claire looked genuinely confused. For what? That reaction. Claire glanced toward the athletics building before looking back at Leora. My dad called it building good habits. Good habits, Leora repeated. Claire nodded. Knowing where people are. Knowing where the exits are. Helping the smallest person leave first if something goes wrong. Keeping calm so somebody else does not panic. Leora slowly realized those habits had nothing to do with military training. They sounded like ordinary lessons passed from one generation to the next on a world where nature itself demanded respect. High above them, hidden behind the observation windows of the upper level, Cale watched the 2 girls talking again. His pride still stung every time he remembered Claire's calm expression in the cafeteria. He wanted her to lose that expression more than anything. She still thinks she belongs here, one of his friends muttered. Cale smiled coldly. Then she has not learned enough yet. He turned away from the window, already planning something bigger than harmless jokes. For the first time since Claire had arrived, his goal was no longer simple embarrassment. He wanted to prove, in front of the entire academy, that the quiet human girl had never deserved a place among them. 3 days later, the academy announced its annual survival systems evaluation, a required exercise where mixed-species teams would spend 4 hours inside a controlled environmental training zone designed to simulate emergency conditions from different worlds. Most students treated it like a competition. Faculty treated it like an exam. Claire treated it exactly the way her father had taught her to treat every unfamiliar place. She packed a small notebook, checked her boots twice, filled her water bottle, and arrived 10 minutes early. You packed actual paper? Leora asked with a smile as they met outside the training complex. Claire held up the notebook. Paper still works when batteries do not. Leora laughed. You really do expect everything to fail? No, Claire answered. I just like having a backup. Inside the briefing hall, holographic maps displayed the layout of the simulation chamber. Artificial forests, rocky terrain, maintenance tunnels, and observation stations filled the projection. Professor Brooks addressed the students. Remember, this is not a combat exercise. It is a decision-making exercise. Your grade depends on teamwork, communication, and protecting the most vulnerable member of your group. Claire noticed Cale leaning against the back wall, wearing the same confident smile he always carried. The moment their eyes met, He smiled even wider. Something about it made the back of Claire's neck tighten. Leora quietly stepped closer. You noticed it too. Claire nodded almost imperceptibly. He is planning something. Should we tell Professor Brooks? Claire thought for a moment before shaking her head. Not yet. We do not know anything. Leora sighed. You always wait for proof. Because accusations without proof become noise. The teams were assigned. Claire and Leora ended up together along with two younger first-year students from smaller member worlds. Neither had ever participated in a full survival evaluation before. One of them, a nervous boy named Naren, admitted he was afraid of enclosed spaces. Claire smiled warmly. Stay close to us. We will figure everything out one step at a time. The boy relaxed immediately. From across the room, Kale watched the interaction with growing irritation. He had wanted Claire isolated. Instead, she had somehow become the calm center of her team without even trying. One of his friends whispered, "Forget her. Beat them fairly." Kale slowly shook his head. "No. She keeps walking away with that same look on her face." "What look?" "Like she already knows something the rest of us do not." His friend frowned. "Maybe she does not." Kale smiled coldly. "Then I will give her something she cannot predict." As the countdown began, the massive training doors opened with a deep mechanical hum. Students entered the artificial wilderness in organized groups while instructors monitored everything from a secure control room above. Cameras tracked every movement. Environmental systems adjusted temperature and gravity in different sectors. It was supposed to be one of the safest facilities in the academy. Claire glanced around as they walked inside. She noticed one emergency beacon blinking slightly out of sequence. A maintenance hatch had fresh tool marks around its frame. One overhead camera hesitated for less than a second before rotating again. Tiny details, probably harmless. Still, she quietly memorized their locations. Leora watched her scan the room. "You are doing it again." Claire smiled faintly. "Doing what?" "Looking for exits before scenery." Claire shrugged. "Old habit." The heavy security doors sealed behind the final group with a solid metallic sound that echoed through the chamber. High above them, hidden inside an unused maintenance corridor that overlooked the control systems, Kale quietly accessed a restricted service panel he had no business touching. He only intended to embarrass Claire in front of the academy. He never stopped to consider what might happen after he changed settings that had been designed to protect every student inside. The exercise began exactly as the instructors promised. Teams navigated marked trails, solved engineering puzzles, and located emergency supply caches hidden throughout the artificial wilderness. The first 30 minutes felt almost relaxing. Naren gradually stopped shaking. Leora laughed when Claire correctly guessed which plants in the simulation were edible simply by looking at their leaf patterns. "Lucky guess?" Leora asked. Claire smiled. "My mom always said if birds refused to touch a berry, you probably should not either." Their second teammate, a quiet student named Tarek, looked around in amazement. "Your family taught survival at home?" Claire nodded. "Where I grew up, everybody learns the basics. Storms do not care how old you are." As they reached the next checkpoint, the overhead lights dimmed for less than a second. Most students ignored it. Claire did not. She stopped walking. "Did you hear that?" Leora listened. "Hear what?" "Nothing," Claire answered. "That is what bothers me." She looked toward the tree line where mechanical wildlife was programmed to produce constant background sounds. The birds had stopped singing. Even the artificial wind generators seemed quieter. Before Leora could respond, every student's wrist communicator chimed at once. A calm computerized voice echoed through the training zone. "Attention participants. Minor systems recalibration in progress. Please remain on your assigned routes." Several teams groaned, assuming it was another routine part of the exercise. Claire slowly turned in a full circle, studying the forest around them. "Something changed," she whispered. "What?" Leora asked. Claire pointed toward a narrow service path partially hidden behind thick artificial brush. "That maintenance gate was closed when we came in. It now stood slightly open." At the same moment, somewhere deeper inside the simulation zone, a frightened voice shouted for help. The sound echoed through the trees before abruptly stopping. Naren froze. Was that part of the exercise? Tarek looked equally uncertain. Leora activated her communicator. "Control, this is Team 7. We heard someone calling for help." Static answered her. She tried again. Nothing. Claire quietly reached for the communicator on her own wrist, and checked the signal indicator. No connection. Communications are down, she said. Leora frowned. That should not be possible. Claire looked toward the observation towers. None of the status lights were blinking anymore. Maybe it is not supposed to be. High above the simulation chamber, Professor Brooks frowned at her own console. Every camera covering Sector 4 had suddenly gone offline. Bring the backup feed online, she ordered. The technician typed rapidly across the control panel before shaking his head. I cannot. The maintenance network is overriding us. Who authorized maintenance during a live exercise? Nobody answered because nobody had. Back inside the training area, another frightened cry echoed through the trees, closer this time. It sounded younger. Naren instinctively stepped behind Claire. We should leave, he whispered. Claire looked toward the emergency exit marked on the map. A heavy blast door had sealed itself across the corridor. That was open 5 minutes ago, she said quietly. Leora finally saw it too. Every escape route they had passed was now closing one after another. Claire, she asked softly, what do we do? Claire did not answer immediately. She closed her eyes for one slow breath. Exactly the way her father had taught her whenever panic threatened to take over. When she opened them again, her voice was calm enough to steady everyone else. First, nobody runs. Second, nobody separates. Third, we find the youngest students before we worry about ourselves. Leora stared at her in silence. Claire was no longer acting like an exchange student trying to fit in. She sounded like someone who had already accepted responsibility the moment things stopped making sense. Somewhere beyond the trees, hidden behind a locked maintenance panel, Kale watched the unexpected lockdown spread across the simulation grid. His confident smile slowly disappeared. He had intended to trigger harmless confusion, not disable half the safety systems inside the academy. For the first time since he started this plan, he realized the situation was no longer under his control. Claire took one careful look around the silent training zone before making a decision that surprised everyone. She did not move toward the loudest noise. She moved toward the nearest maintenance marker painted along the edge of the trail. This way, she said. Leora blinked. The voices came from the other direction. Claire nodded. Exactly. If the main paths are failing, maintenance routes were designed for emergencies. Whoever built this place expected something to go wrong eventually. Naren looked back toward the forest. But what if somebody needs us? Claire placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We are going to help them. We just need to stay alive long enough to do it. Her calm voice slowed everyone's breathing. Even Leora found herself following without questioning the plan. They left the marked trail and entered a narrow service corridor hidden behind artificial stone walls. The passage was barely 6 feet wide, lined with utility conduits and emergency lighting that flickered every few seconds. Claire stopped beside a wall panel and gently placed her palm against it. The backup generators are still running, she said. How do you know? Tarek asked. You can feel the vibration. The others copied her and finally noticed the faint rhythmic hum traveling through the metal. Leora stared at Claire with growing disbelief. She had walked past dozens of identical panels during her years at the academy without ever thinking to listen to them. A distant cry echoed again, this time followed by frightened voices calling each other's names. Claire immediately counted them under her breath. 4, maybe 5 students. Leora frowned. You can tell how many? Close enough. Claire pointed ahead. They are somewhere beyond the environmental lab. They rounded a corner and discovered 2 younger students standing outside a sealed security door. Both looked frightened but uninjured. One of them recognized Leora immediately. The door's locked behind us, the younger girl said. Our instructor disappeared when the alarm started. Claire knelt beside the control panel instead of pulling on the door. She studied the display for several seconds before smiling faintly. This is only a software lock. Leora looked confused. Can you open it? Claire shook her head. Not from here. But somebody forgot to secure the manual override. She reached beneath the control housing, found a small mechanical release hidden behind a maintenance cover, and slowly turned it until the heavy door unlocked with a deep click. Both younger students stared at her in amazement. How did you know that was there? Claire smiled. My mom always said if something important only works when the computer behaves, then it was designed by somebody who never had to fix it. Even Leora laughed despite everything happening around them. As the group continued forward, they gathered more separated students along the way. Without realizing it, Everyone began looking to Claire before making even simple decisions. She never demanded authority. She simply kept solving one problem after another. Meanwhile, inside the Academy Control Center, Professor Brooks finally restored a partial camera feed. Every available screen displayed the same surprising image. While several older students were arguing about who should lead, the quiet human exchange student had already organized frightened first-year students into a calm, orderly group moving safely through the maintenance corridors. One technician looked at the monitor and quietly said, "She is acting like she has done this before." Professor Brooks folded her arms without taking her eyes off the screen. "No," she answered softly. "She is acting like someone who was raised to believe that when people are scared, somebody has to stay calm." Far away in the hidden maintenance station, Cale watched the emergency network refuse every command he entered. Warning symbols flashed across his console as more safety systems locked themselves into protective mode. His hands suddenly felt cold. This had gone far beyond a school prank. Then one camera briefly came back online. On the monitor, he saw Claire leading nearly a dozen students through the service corridor with steady confidence, while everyone else followed without hesitation. For the first time since meeting her, Cale did not see a quiet girl trying to fit in. He saw someone becoming exactly the person everyone else instinctively trusted when everything around them started falling apart. By the time Claire's group reached the central service hub, nearly 20 students had fallen in behind her without anyone officially asking who was in charge. It happened naturally. Every time somebody panicked, Claire gave them one simple job. Every time somebody froze, she reminded them to take one step instead of 10. Fear slowly gave way to focus. "Everybody drink some water," Claire said as they stopped beside a maintenance station. Several students looked confused. "Now," one asked. Claire nodded. "People make worse decisions when they are thirsty, even if they do not realize it yet." Leora smiled quietly. "Your parents taught you everything through ordinary life, did not they?" Claire laughed softly while tightening the cap on her bottle. "Pretty much." Before anyone could continue the conversation, every emergency light in the corridor suddenly switched from white to amber. A new announcement echoed through the facility, but this one sounded distorted. "Sector, isolation, maintenance override, remain." The message dissolved into static. Naren looked up nervously. "That does not sound normal." "It is not," Claire answered. "The system is trying to say something, but another command keeps interrupting it." Leora stared at the nearest control panel. "Can you tell?" Claire pointed to the alternating status lights. "Green means the Academy. Amber means manual maintenance control. They are fighting each other." Hundreds of feet above them, Professor Brooks finally regained partial access to the internal network. Camera after camera returned online, revealing frightened groups scattered throughout the simulation complex. Then one video feed caught her attention. A maintenance terminal hidden on the upper level showed an unauthorized access record linked to a student identification badge. The technician enlarged the image until the identification number became clear. Silence settled across the control room. Professor Brooks looked at the screen for several long seconds before quietly saying, "Find him." Meanwhile, Cale stared at the same warning messages flashing across his hidden console. He had already tried restoring the original settings, but every failed attempt only triggered another security lock. "Come on," he whispered to himself. "Reset." Nothing happened. For the first time in years, the confidence that had followed him everywhere disappeared completely. He was no longer worried about punishment. He was worried that someone might actually get hurt because of him. Back inside the service corridor, Claire suddenly stopped walking. Everyone behind her nearly bumped into one another. "What is wrong?" Leora asked. Claire slowly looked toward a ventilation shaft near the ceiling. "Listen." The group remained silent. At first nobody heard anything. Then, faintly, came the sound of someone crying. Not from the hallway ahead. From above them. Claire looked at the maintenance diagram mounted beside the wall. "There is another level directly over us. Can we reach it?" Leora asked. Claire traced the emergency routes with her finger until she found a vertical access ladder hidden behind another service panel. "Yes." Tarek looked uncertain. "Should we wait for the instructors?" Claire glanced at the powerless communication device on her wrist. If they were able to reach us, they already would have. She carefully opened the access panel without forcing anything. The ladder extended upward into darkness. Before climbing, Claire turned toward the younger students. Nobody comes up unless I say it is safe. Leora, stay with them. Leora immediately shook her head. I am coming with you. Claire smiled faintly. I was hoping you would say that. The two climbed carefully until they reached a narrow maintenance platform overlooking another section of the training complex. Below them, several frightened first-year students stood trapped behind a sealed environmental gate. They were safe for the moment, but completely cut off. Claire studied the locking mechanism from above. Can you open it? Leora whispered. Claire looked around the maintenance platform instead of the door itself. After only a few seconds, she spotted a large red mechanical release wheel mounted beside a backup hydraulic line. She smiled. Sometimes people build the smartest systems in the galaxy, and then hide the simplest solution right beside them. Leora watched Claire walk toward the manual release with steady confidence. In that moment, she finally understood what everyone else had missed from the beginning. Claire never stayed calm because she believed nothing could go wrong. She stayed calm because she believed there was always something useful to do before panic helped anyone. Claire wrapped both hands around the large red release wheel and slowly turned it until the hydraulic lock disengaged with a deep mechanical sound that echoed through the maintenance shaft. Below them, the heavy environmental gate lifted just high enough for the trapped first-year students to crawl underneath one at a time. The youngest girl looked up at Claire with tears in her eyes. Thank you. Claire smiled the same quiet smile she had worn since arriving at the academy. You did the hard part. You stayed together. Within minutes, the academy's emergency response team finally restored full control of the simulation complex. Communication signals returned. The sealed exits reopened. Instructors hurried through the corridors, checking every student. Professor Brooks was among the first to reach Claire and Leora. She looked at the growing crowd of students gathered safely behind them before letting out the breath she had apparently been holding for several minutes. Is everyone accounted for? She asked. Leora nodded. Because of Claire. Professor Brooks looked at the young human for a long moment. Because of all of you, Claire corrected gently. Everybody listened. Far above them, security officers escorted Kale from the maintenance control room. He did not argue. He did not try to explain. His shoulders were lower than anyone had ever seen them. Later that afternoon, the Academy Council assembled inside the main auditorium. Every student attended. Camera recordings from the maintenance network played across the enormous display. They showed unauthorized system changes linked directly to Kale's identification badge. They also showed something else. While panic spread across different sectors, one student after another had quietly chosen to follow Claire without being told to do so. Nobody applauded when the recordings ended. The room was simply silent. Kale finally stood. His voice was almost unrecognizable. I never wanted anyone to be in danger. Professor Brooks answered calmly. Intentions matter. Choices matter more. Kale lowered his eyes. For the first time since anyone could remember, he had nothing to say. The council suspended his leadership privileges, required him to complete community service throughout the academy, and removed his family's automatic representation from the student council for the remainder of the year. No one celebrated the decision. Even Claire remained quiet. As students slowly filed out of the auditorium, Leora caught up with her near the entrance. After everything that happened, she asked softly, "Why are you not angry?" Claire looked through the tall windows where evening sunlight painted the academy gardens in shades of gold. She thought about Montana. She thought about her parents. She thought about every lesson that had quietly shaped her long before she ever left Earth. Being angry is easy, she said. Helping people is harder. I would rather spend my energy on the harder thing. The next morning looked almost exactly like every other school day. The cafeteria was noisy again. Students laughed. Homework was forgotten. Coffee was spilled. Claire walked inside carrying the same backpack with the little Earth keychain swinging gently from the zipper. She sat at the same table where everything had started weeks earlier. This time she did not sit alone for long. Leora arrived first, then Naren, then Tarek. Soon students from worlds Claire had never even heard of before asked if they could join them. Nobody mentioned what had happened. They did not need to. Across the room, Kale paused before walking over. Every conversation nearby became quiet. He looked at the Earth keychain for a second before meeting Claire's eyes. I was wrong, he said simply. Claire studied him for a moment, then offered the empty chair across from her table. Then sit down. Everybody gets another chance after they decide to earn it. Years later, graduates of Arc Valorum Academy would remember many lessons about engineering, diplomacy, and interstellar law. Yet the story they told their own children was never about a broken training exercise. It was about the quiet human girl who never confused kindness with weakness, who proved that real strength rarely announces itself, and who taught an entire generation that the bravest person in the room is often the one who stays calm long enough to help everyone else find their way home.
Lauren Mitchell had been working on the planet for 8 months. She was a scientist who studied alien animals and plants. The research base sat at the edge of a strange forest made of giant crystal towers. These towers caught the light from 3 moons and made everything glow at night. Lauren was collecting rock samples near the edge of the safe zone when she heard a sound. It was a small, high cry that made her stop walking. The sound came again. It was the kind of noise that hurt animals make when they are scared and in pain. She knew the rules said she should go back to the base right away. The creatures on this planet were dangerous. The military called them Vraken, and they were listed as the most deadly predators in this part of space. They hunted in groups. They could hide so well that you could not see them even when they were close. Many explorers had died meeting them, but Lauren had worked with animals her whole life. That crying sound was something she understood. It did not matter what planet the animal came from. Pain and fear sounded the same everywhere. Her feet moved toward the sound before her brain could tell them to stop. She found the baby Vraken stuck between 2 crystal rocks. Its back leg was caught in a narrow gap. The creature was small, about the size of a house cat. Its fur was dark blue and seemed to glow with its own light. It had 6 eyes, 3 on each side of its head. All 6 eyes were open wide with fear. When the baby saw Lauren, it made a hissing noise and showed its teeth. The teeth were sharp like needles. Lauren got down on her knees slowly. She kept her hands where the creature could see them. She talked in a soft voice, even though she knew the animal could not understand her words. But animals always understood when someone was trying to help or hurt them. The baby hissed again, but Lauren could see it was very tired. It had probably been stuck here for many hours. Its leg looked swollen and hurt. The glowing patterns on its fur were blinking on and off in a strange way. Lauren had read that this meant the Vraken was very stressed. She pulled out her small scanner and looked at the problem. The gap was too narrow. If she just pulled the baby out, she might hurt its leg even more. She would need to make the gap bigger. Lauren took out a small laser cutter from her tool bag. She started cutting away tiny pieces of the crystal very carefully. The baby watched her with all 6 eyes. It stopped hissing. Now it just made small crying sounds. Lauren kept working and kept talking softly to it. Every few minutes she would stop cutting and say something gentle. After 20 minutes of careful work, she made the gap wide enough. She reached in and slowly pulled the hurt leg free. The baby tried to run away as soon as it was free, but its hurt leg could not hold its weight. It started to fall. Lauren caught it without thinking. She held it against her chest. The creature went very still and hard. Lauren thought those sharp teeth were going to bite her throat. She waited for the pain, but the bite never came. Instead, something strange happened. The baby relaxed in her arms. The glowing patterns on its fur started to pulse slowly and steadily. Lauren had read about this in her research books. It was like a cat purring. It meant the Vraken felt safe and happy. Lauren carried the baby back to her workstation. She knew she was breaking many rules. The base commander would be very angry if he found out. He might send her back to Earth, but she could not leave a hurt baby animal alone in the forest. Something bigger might find it and kill it. Her workstation was a small building with 1 room. Inside, she put the baby on her work table and started to fix its leg. The creature stayed calm. It watched her with those 6 intelligent eyes while she put medicine on the swollen leg and wrapped it carefully. Her scanner said nothing was broken. The leg was just badly bruised and strained. When she finished, the baby made a soft chirping sound. It was clearly hungry. Lauren thought about what to feed it. Vraken only ate meat. They could not digest plants or grain. The food paste that everyone at the base ate would not work. She opened her cold storage box and found a package of fake meat. It was grown in a lab but looked and tasted like real beef. The base only had this for special days when people got tired of regular food. She heated a small piece and cut it into tiny bits. The baby's eyes locked onto the meat right away. Its glowing patterns got much brighter. It made excited chirping sounds. When Lauren put a piece of meat on the table, the creature jumped on it fast. It ate like it had not eaten in days. While the baby ate, Lauren made her own dinner. She mixed hot water with dried food that turned into something that was supposed to be pasta. She sat at her desk eating and writing notes on her computer. The baby finished its meat and licked its paws clean with a dark blue tongue. Then it turned to watch her eat. Lauren smiled and held out a small piece of her pasta. The baby sniffed it carefully. Then it took the piece in its mouth and chewed. A second later, it spit the pasta out and made a face that clearly said the food was terrible. Lauren laughed. It was the first time she had really laughed in weeks. The baby seemed to forgive her for offering bad food. It jumped down from the table, keeping weight off its hurt leg. It walked over to her chair. After waiting a moment, it climbed up into her lap and curled into a ball. The glowing patterns on its fur pulsed slowly. That meant it was content. Lauren froze. She barely breathed. This was impossible. The book said Vraken could never be tamed. They said Vraken hated all other species and would attack on sight. But here was a baby Vraken, one of the most feared creatures in the galaxy, sleeping in her lap like a kitten. She knew she should call the other scientists at the main base. This was a chance to learn things no one had ever learned before, but something stopped her. The baby had been hurt and scared and alone. It had trusted her when it had every reason not to. Calling people to study it felt wrong. It felt like breaking a promise, so Lauren just sat there. She gently touched the baby's soft fur. She finished writing her daily reports. The creature was warm. The vibrations from its purring were relaxing. When she finally needed to sleep, she carefully moved the baby to her bed. It immediately took her pillow. Lauren did not try to move it. She lay down next to the baby. She thought she would stay awake all night. She was nervous about sleeping next to a predator, but the steady pulsing of the creature's glowing fur and the gentle vibrations of its purring made her relaxed. Within minutes, she fell into the deepest sleep she had experienced since coming to this planet. She did not know that by morning her life would change forever. Lauren woke up slowly. Something warm was breathing on her face. She opened her eyes and found herself looking at a huge Vraken. This was not the baby. This was a full-grown adult. It was twice her size. Its jaws could crush her skull like an egg. Its 6 eyes stared right into hers. Every part of her brain screamed at her to run, to fight, to do something. But Lauren knew that any fast movement would probably be the last thing she ever did. So she stayed very still. Her heart was beating so hard she thought it might break her ribs. The big Vraken looked at her for a long time. It seemed to be thinking. Then it opened its mouth. Lauren waited for those huge teeth to bite. Instead, the creature made a low, deep sound. It was not a growl. It was something else. It almost sounded like talking. The baby, still on her pillow, chirped back. The adult turned its head to look at the little one. Lauren saw the big Vraken's eyes move to the bandage on the baby's leg. When it looked back at Lauren, something in its face had changed. Very slowly, Lauren reached out her hand. She put it on the baby's head and petted its fur gently. The baby made that happy purring sound. Its glow patterns pulsed bright and steady. The adult watched this. It seemed surprised. Then the big Vraken did something that made Lauren's heart almost stop. It lowered its huge head. It pushed its head against her other hand. Lauren understood. This was the baby's parent. It was saying thank you. She slowly moved her hand to touch the adult's fur. It was rougher than the baby's fur, but just as warm. The creature's glow patterns started to pulse. They matched the rhythm of the baby's patterns. That deep rumbling sound came again. Lauren realized it was their version of purring. A noise outside made them both turn. Lauren looked through her window. In the early morning light, she could see more shapes moving. More Vraken, many more. The whole pack had come for their lost baby. Fear hit Lauren like a wave. She was alone in a small room with deadly predators outside. But the adult next to her did not act aggressive. It walked to the door and looked back at her. Lauren did not know why, but she followed it. She walked to the door. Her hands shook as she reached for the handle. She opened the door slowly. Outside, the 3 moons were setting. In their pale light stood 6 more adult Vraken. The pack. They all looked at her with their 6 eyes, their heads tilted to one side. Lauren had started to learn that this meant they were curious, not angry. The baby limped out the door. It chirped excitedly. All the adults surrounded it right away. They checked it all over. Their glow patterns were flashing fast. Lauren thought they might be talking to each other with the lights. Then one by one, each adult came to Lauren. Each one pressed its head against her, just like the first one had done. Lauren stood perfectly still. Her scientific mind was recording everything even though her body wanted to run away. But nothing bad happened. Each creature made that deep rumbling purr sound. Each one seemed to be thanking her. When the last one finished, Lauren thought they would leave. She thought they would take their baby and go back to the forest. Instead, the pack settled down around her small building. They arranged themselves in a circle. The baby limped back to Lauren. It pressed against her leg and looked up at her with trust in all 6 eyes. Lauren stood there, surrounded by the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. She realized something important had just happened. She had not just saved a baby animal. She had been accepted. They saw her as one of them now. The next few weeks were strange and wonderful. The Vraken pack did not leave. They made Lauren's area their home. She found herself living among them. She gave the baby a name. She called it Nova because its glow patterns flared like a star when it was happy. Nova got better quickly. Within days it was running and jumping everywhere, but it always came back to Lauren. Every evening it would return to sleep in her room. It still took her pillow every single night. The adult Vraken kept their distance at first, but were always nearby. Lauren started to tell them apart. The biggest one seemed to be the leader. She named him Titanium because he was so strong and solid. There was a smaller, faster one she called Swift. This one often brought Lauren gifts, pretty crystal rocks that caught the light. Another Vraken watched Lauren with special interest. This one seemed to study everything Lauren did. She tilted her head whenever Lauren spoke. Lauren named her Sage because she seemed wise. Sage reminded Lauren of a scientist, always observing and learning. Lauren wrote down everything she saw. She filled her computer files with notes about the Vraken. They were not mindless beasts like everyone thought. They were smart. They were social. They solved problems. Their glow patterns were not just for hiding. They were for talking. The patterns showed feelings and ideas. Even more surprising, the Vraken were teaching Lauren. When she worked too long without eating, Titanium would bring her food. It was always fresh meat from their hunts. When she walked too far into dangerous areas, Swift would appear and lead her back to safety. When she felt stressed about her work, Sage would sit next to her. The calm, steady pulse of Sage's glow patterns always made Lauren feel better. 3 weeks after the pack arrived, Lauren made a big discovery. She had been studying the glow patterns, trying to understand what they meant. She thought she had found the pattern for danger. She built a small machine that could make light patterns. She wanted to test if she was right. Nova watched closely as Lauren worked. When Lauren turned on her machine, it flashed the lights she thought meant danger. Every adult Vraken nearby suddenly stood up. Their own patterns started flashing in response. They were reacting to her signal, but then Sage came over to the machine. She looked at it carefully. Then Sage's own glow patterns began to flash in a slow, clear sequence. Lauren recorded it quickly. She spent hours studying what Sage had shown her. Finally, she understood. Sage had not been fixing her danger signal. Sage had been teaching her a new pattern. This pattern did not mean danger. It meant question. Sage was asking Lauren what she was trying to do. Sage was trying to talk to her. Lauren's hands shook with excitement. She changed her machine to make new patterns. She created what she hoped meant understanding. Sage answered with a pattern Lauren had seen before but never decoded. It meant approval. It meant yes. Over the next days, Lauren and Sage had lessons. The Vraken taught Lauren their light patterns. Lauren taught Sage human words. It was slow work. It was hard work. But both of them learned quickly. They both wanted to understand each other. The other Vraken watched these lessons with interest. Soon all of them joined in their own way. Titanium would show Lauren how they hunted. Then he would wait while Lauren wrote notes about it. Swift brought Lauren samples from faraway parts of the forest. It was like Swift understood that Lauren needed these things for her research. But Nova made the biggest breakthrough. One evening, Lauren was sitting and writing her notes like always. Nova climbed into her lap as usual. But this time, instead of just curling up to sleep, Nova looked up at her. The young Vraken made a pattern with its glow that Lauren had never seen before. Lauren checked her translation machine. Her heart started beating fast. This was a new pattern. Nova had not used any of the common signals they had been learning. The baby had created something new. It combined pieces of several different patterns. Lauren studied the pattern for a long time. Then she understood what it meant. It meant pack bond human. Nova was not just showing love. The baby was saying that Lauren was family. Lauren was part of the pack now. She belonged with them, and they belonged with her. The situation stayed hidden from the main base for almost a month. Lauren's workstation was far from the central compound. She only had to check in by radio once a day. As long as she sent her regular reports, no one came to visit her. But secrets like this could not stay hidden forever. A supply ship came to drop off equipment at different research stations around the planet. When the pilot flew over Lauren's area, he saw something that made him panic. A whole pack of Vraken surrounded one of their buildings. He immediately called the main base with an emergency alert. Commander Gregory Hammond led the rescue team himself. He brought 6 armed security guards. They flew to Lauren's station expecting the worst. They thought they would find her body. Or maybe they would find nothing at all. Vraken usually did not leave evidence behind. What Hammond found instead made him stop and stare. Lauren was sitting outside her building in the morning sun. She was surrounded by Vraken. Nova was asleep in her lap. Sage sat next to her, head tilted listening as Lauren explained something about their communication system. The other adults lay nearby in relaxed positions. The security team did not know what to do. They raised their weapons. They aimed at the Vraken, but they did not shoot. They were too confused by what they were seeing. Hammond stared with his mouth open. This was impossible. Humans did not sit peacefully with Vraken. Vraken killed humans. Everyone knew that. Hammond finally found his voice. He ordered Lauren to come back to the main base right away. His voice was sharp and commanding. Lauren looked up at him calmly. She said no. She explained that leaving now would hurt the Vraken. They would think she was rejecting them. That could undo all the trust they had built. Hammond's face turned red with anger. He said he would remove her by force if necessary. He could not leave one of his scientists living with dangerous predators. It was against every rule and safety protocol. That was when Titanium stood up. The huge Vraken moved between Lauren and the security team. His glow patterns flashed in a way that Lauren had learned meant protection. The other adults stood up too. They formed a half circle around Lauren. They were not attacking, but they were making their position clear. They would not let anyone take her. The security team gripped their weapons tighter. Fingers moved to triggers. The situation was about to turn deadly. Lauren jumped up quickly. She put herself between the two groups. Nova fell out of her lap but quickly recovered and stood beside her, chirping with alarm. Lauren pulled out her translation device. She made it flash a pattern that meant peace and safety. The Vraken responded immediately. Their aggressive patterns changed to calm ones. They did not move away from Lauren, but they stopped looking like they were about to attack. Hammond watched this happen. His expression changed from anger to shock to something like wonder. He asked Lauren what she had just done. How had she made them calm down? How was she talking to them? Lauren took a deep breath and started to explain. For the next hour, Lauren showed Hammond everything she had learned. She demonstrated the communication system. She showed him her research notes. She explained how the Vraken were not mindless beasts. They were intelligent. They had language. They had feelings and thoughts and social structures. She told him the whole story. How she found Nova hurt and trapped. How she helped the baby and fed it. How the pack came and accepted her. How they had been living together and learning from each other. She showed him weeks of careful observations and data. Hammond listened to all of it. He looked at the Vraken with new eyes. He watched how they moved, how they communicated with their glow patterns, how they interacted with Lauren with obvious trust and even affection. He was a military man, not a scientist, but he could see that something remarkable was happening here. Finally, Hammond made a decision. He contacted the fleet headquarters immediately. He told them that they had made first contact with an intelligent alien species. He requested immediate support from the Xenology department. He asked for more scientists and resources. This was too important to keep quiet. The response from headquarters was fast. Within 3 days, ships started arriving. Scientists came from all over this sector of space. Everyone wanted to observe and study. But they quickly learned that the Vraken would not tolerate being treated like lab animals. Any scientist who approached without respect got clear warning displays from the pack. Lauren became the bridge between the two species. She was the only human the pack fully trusted. She had to approve every person who wanted to come close. She had to teach the new scientists how to approach the Vraken properly. how to read their signals, how to show respect. With Sage's help, Lauren built a better translation system. It was not perfect. There were still many things the two species could not communicate, but it was enough for basic understanding, and what they learned changed everything. The Vraken had their own name for themselves. They called themselves the Illuminated Ones. The name came from their ability to make light. They did not think of it as just communication. To them, the light was art, it was history, it was poetry. Their glow patterns could tell stories that had been passed down for hundreds of generations. They had culture. They had traditions. In the crystal forests, they created temporary light sculptures that were more beautiful than anything humans had made. These sculptures told stories of their history. Stories of great hunts. Stories of lost loved ones. Stories of joy and sorrow and hope. The scientists realized they had made a terrible mistake. For years, humans and other spacefaring species had treated the Vraken as animals. They had shot at them. They had driven them from their lands. They had never tried to communicate. They had never shown any kindness or respect. Of course, the Vraken had fought back. Of course, they had been hostile. Every encounter with other species had started with aggression. Ships entering their space without permission. Colonies built on their hunting grounds. Hunters coming for trophy kills. The Vraken had only been defending themselves and their families. Lauren had done something simple but profound. She had helped a baby in pain. She had shared food with no expectation of reward. She had treated the Vraken as beings worthy of kindness and respect. And they had responded with trust and acceptance. They had claimed her as family because she had shown them the most basic form of decency. The news spread through the galaxy. The military classification of the Vraken changed immediately. They were no longer listed as dangerous animals. They were recognized as a sentient civilization. All the territories marked for human colonization were redesignated as protected cultural zones. Trade talks began. The Vraken had much to offer. Their crystal forests produced unique formations that had applications in technology. They knew about medicinal plants that could cure diseases humans had been fighting for decades. In exchange, they wanted technology and knowledge. They wanted to learn about the galaxy beyond their world. 6 months after Lauren found Nova in the crystal rocks, the first official embassy opened. It was built at the edge of the forest where Lauren had her workstation. The building was designed by both humans and Vraken working together. It had spaces for both species. It had translation systems built into the walls. No one was surprised when Lauren was named as the first human ambassador to the Illuminated Ones. She knew their language better than anyone. She understood their culture. Most importantly, she had their trust. And trust, everyone was learning, was the foundation of everything. But despite her new official position, Lauren never left her pack. She continued to live among them. She learned their ways as they learned hers. Nova grew bigger and stronger, but the bond they formed that first night never weakened. The young Vraken would still curl up next to Lauren every evening, glow patterns pulsing with contentment. And every night, surrounded by her pack under 3 moons, Lauren thought about that moment when she heard a small cry of pain and chose to help instead of walk away. That one choice had changed her life. It had changed the future of 2 species. It had proven that sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is show kindness to someone who is afraid. The embassy became a place of constant activity and discovery. Every day brought new understanding between humans and the Illuminated Ones. But the most important work was not happening in meetings or laboratories. It was happening in the daily lives of those who chose to build bridges between the 2 species. Lauren watched as more humans followed her example. A young engineer named Kate befriended a different pack that lived near the Southern Research Station. Kate had been repairing a water collector when she noticed a young Vraken watching her work. Instead of chasing it away, she showed the curious creature what she was doing. Soon the whole pack was helping her identify underground water sources using their superior senses. A medical doctor named Paul started treating injured Vraken who came to the embassy. At first, he only saw wounds from accidents or fights with other predators. But as trust grew, Vraken began bringing their sick and elderly to him. Paul learned their biology. He developed medicines that worked for their unique chemistry. The Vraken, in turn, showed him plants from the forest that had powerful healing properties humans had never discovered. The success stories spread. Within a year, small communities of humans were living alongside Vraken packs across the planet. Each community developed its own unique relationship. Some focused on agriculture, learning which crops grew best with Vraken help. Others studied the crystal forest together, discovering that the formations were actually living organisms that the Vraken had been protecting for generations. But not everything was smooth. There were misunderstandings. There were accidents. Once a young human child got too close to a Vraken nest during breeding season. The protective parents nearly attacked before Lauren arrived and calmed everyone down. After that, both species worked together to create clear guidelines about boundaries and sensitive times. There was also resistance from some humans who could not accept the Vraken as equals. A group of colonists from a nearby system arrived wanting to settle land that belonged to a Vraken territory. They refused to accept the new classifications. They said the land was wasted on animals. They tried to build there anyway. The local Vraken pack responded with clear warnings. They created intimidating light displays. They surrounded the construction equipment. But they did not attack. They had learned from Lauren and others that humans could be reasoned with. They waited for the proper authorities to intervene. Hammond, now promoted to regional commander, arrived with security forces. He ordered the colonists to leave immediately. When they protested, he showed them recordings of Vraken art and culture. He showed them evidence of complex mathematics in their architecture. He made it clear that anyone who violated Vraken territory would face serious criminal charges. The colonists left, angry but compliant. The incident became famous throughout human space. It sent a clear message. The days of treating inhabited worlds as empty territory were over. Sentient beings had rights, regardless of how different they seemed from humans. Meanwhile, the cultural exchange deepened. Vraken artists began creating light sculptures specifically for human audiences. They learned what humans found beautiful and incorporated those elements. Human artists tried to learn the Vraken style, though they had to use technology rather than their own bodies to create the light patterns. The first joint art exhibition was held at the embassy. Humans came from across the sector to see it. They watched in wonder as Vraken created flowing patterns of light that told stories older than human space travel. They saw sculptures that captured emotions so perfectly that many viewers cried. The exhibition proved that beauty and meaning could transcend species barriers. Nova grew into a strong adult during this time. The young Vraken that Lauren had saved was now almost as big as titanium. But despite the size and strength, Nova remained gentle with Lauren. Every evening, without fail, Nova would find Lauren and settle beside her. The bond they shared was famous now. Children across human space learned about the scientist and the Vraken cub in their schools. Lauren's original pack became something like ambassadors themselves. They were patient with new humans who came to learn. They demonstrated their culture willingly. Sage, in particular, seemed to enjoy teaching. The wise Vraken spent hours helping human linguists understand the nuances of lightspeak. She corrected their attempts with patience that surprised everyone. Titanium took on a different role. He worked with human security forces to establish protocols for safety. He showed them how to read Vraken body language. He taught them the difference between a warning display and an actual threat. He helped create a system where both species could feel safe around each other. Swift became a guide for human explorers. The fast Vraken knew the crystal forests better than anyone. She led scientific expeditions to discover new species of plants and understand the ecosystem. She showed humans secret places of great beauty, waterfalls that glowed with bioluminescent algae, caves filled with singing crystals that resonated with specific frequencies. The relationship between species evolved in ways no one had predicted. Vraken began visiting human settlements out of curiosity. They wanted to see human technology. They wanted to taste human food, though most of it disagreed with their digestion. They wanted to understand how humans lived when they were not in the forest. Humans, in turn, were invited to join Vraken hunts, not to kill, but to observe and participate in the strategy. They learned that Vraken hunts were not mindless violence. They were carefully planned operations that showed respect for the prey. The Vraken took only what they needed. They used every part of what they killed. They thanked the spirits of the animals they hunted. Religious and philosophical discussions began. The Vraken had their own beliefs about the universe and their place in it. They believed that all light came from the same source, that every being that could create or appreciate beauty was connected. Human philosophers found parallels with their own traditions. They discovered that questions about meaning and purpose were universal. Children of both species began playing together. Young Vraken would chase human children in games of tag. Human children would try to mimic the light patterns, using flashlights and colored filters. The games were clumsy at first, with many misunderstandings. But children were more flexible than adults. They adapted quickly to each other's ways. Scientists began studying the long-term effects of this cooperation. They documented improved mental health among humans who lived near Vraken packs. The presence of the illuminated ones seemed to reduce stress and anxiety. Their calm, rhythmic light patterns had a soothing effect on human nervous systems. The Vraken benefited too. Human medicine had saved many Vraken lives. Human technology helped them communicate over long distances, allowing separated packs to stay in contact. Human agriculture meant they no longer faced starvation during harsh seasons. The relationship was truly mutual. 2 years after Lauren found Nova, the Galactic Council officially recognized the Illuminated Ones as a member species. They were granted a seat at the council, and all the rights that came with it. The Vraken chose Sage to be their first representative. It was a natural choice. Sage had always been interested in understanding other species. Lauren accompanied Sage to the first council meeting. She watched with pride as the Vraken diplomat communicated through a sophisticated translation system. Sage spoke about the importance of approaching differences with curiosity rather than fear. She spoke about the value of patience and respect. She reminded the council that every species had wisdom to share if others would only listen. The speech was broadcast across the galaxy. It became one of the most watched transmissions in history. Billions of beings from hundreds of species saw a Vraken, once thought to be a mindless beast, speaking with eloquence and wisdom about cooperation and peace. After the council meeting, Lauren and Sage returned to the Crystal Forest. They returned to the pack that had become family. Nova greeted them with excited chirps and bright flashing patterns. Titanium nodded his massive head in approval. Swift brought them a particularly beautiful crystal as a welcome home gift. That night, under 3 moons, the whole pack gathered for a celebration. They created a light sculpture together, all of them contributing their glow patterns. It told the story of a lost cub, a kind human, and the friendship that changed the galaxy. It was beautiful. It was true. And it reminded everyone that the smallest acts of kindness could have the biggest consequences. 5 years passed since the day Lauren found Nova trapped in the crystal rocks. The planet had transformed from a lonely research outpost into a thriving center of interspecies cooperation. More humans arrived each month, not as colonists claiming empty land, but as students wanting to learn from the Illuminated Ones. Universities from across human space established branches here. They taught courses in Vraken culture, language, and philosophy. Young humans studied alongside young Vraken, learning from each other. The first generation of truly bilingual individuals was growing up, equally comfortable with human speech and light patterns. Lauren's work had evolved beyond anyone's expectations. She was no longer just an ambassador. She had become the director of the Institute for Interspecies Understanding. Her research papers were required reading for anyone studying first contact protocols. Her methods, which she always insisted were just basic kindness and respect, had been adopted across the galaxy. The phenomenon became known officially as the Mitchell Approach. But Lauren hated that name. She always told people it was not about her. It was about recognizing that intelligence and consciousness came in many forms. It was about putting aside fear and prejudice to see the individual behind the differences. The success with the Vraken inspired similar efforts elsewhere. On distant worlds, humans and other species began approaching previously hostile aliens with patience and respect instead of weapons. Not every attempt succeeded. Some species truly were incompatible with others due to biology or fundamental differences in thinking, but many former enemies became friends once communication was established. Nova had fully matured into a magnificent adult Vraken. She was large and powerful, with glow patterns that were unusually bright and complex. Other Vraken often came to watch her create light sculptures. She had a talent for art that was rare even among her kind. But despite her fame and status, Nova never strayed far from Lauren. The bond between them had become legendary. Students traveled from across the galaxy just to observe them together. Scientists studied their relationship, trying to understand the deep connection that had formed. But what they found was simple. It was love. Not romantic love, but the deep familial love between individuals who had saved each other in fundamental ways. Lauren's original pack had grown over the years. Titanium had taken a mate and they had their own cubs now. Swift had become the fastest hunter on the planet, legendary even among other Rakan packs. Sage had retired from her position at the Galactic Council, but continued teaching at the Institute. All of them still gathered with Lauren regularly, maintaining the pack bonds that had formed that first morning. On the 5th anniversary of First Contact, a grand celebration was planned. Representatives from every major species in the galaxy were invited. The Galactic Council had declared it Interspecies Harmony Day. The main event would be held in the Crystal Forest, at the exact spot where Lauren had found Nova. Thousands attended. Humans, Vraken, and dozens of other species gathered in the forest. Translation devices allowed everyone to communicate. Food from 100 worlds was shared. Music and light sculptures filled the air. It was chaotic and beautiful and unlike anything that had happened before in galactic history. Lauren was asked to give a speech. She stood on a natural stage formed by crystal formations, looking out at the diverse crowd. Nova stood beside her, as always. Lauren spoke simply the way she always did. She told the story one more time. How she heard a cry for help. How she chose to respond with kindness. How that simple choice had changed everything. She talked about the moment the pack accepted her. How she realized that family was not about biology or species. It was about who you chose to protect, to care for, to stand beside. She spoke about Nova growing up and the joy of watching someone you helped become strong and confident and happy. Then she said something that would be quoted for generations. She said that every person had the power to change the galaxy, not through grand gestures or heroic actions, though those had their place, but through small, everyday choices to be kind rather than cruel, to be curious rather than fearful, to see the person rather than the difference. When she finished, Nova created a light sculpture. It was the most complex and beautiful pattern the young Vraken had ever made. It showed the story from her perspective. The pain of being trapped. The fear when a strange creature approached. The moment when fear turned to trust. The growing love and security of being part of a pack that included this odd, gentle human. The sculpture brought many to tears. It was so honest and emotional that even species who normally did not cry found themselves affected. It reminded everyone that beneath all the physical differences, sentient beings shared the same basic needs: safety, family, love, purpose, understanding. After the ceremony, Lauren walked through the forest with her pack. They moved away from the crowds to a quiet place they had claimed as their own years ago. A small clearing where the crystal formations created a natural shelter. This was where they came when they needed peace. They settled into their usual positions. Nova curled against Lauren's side. Sage lay nearby, her glow patterns pulsing with contentment. Titanium took his protective position at the edge of the clearing. Swift brought fresh water from a nearby stream. The cubs, curious and playful, tumbled around them all. Lauren looked around at her family. They were so different from her in almost every way. Different bodies, different languages, different instincts and needs. But none of that mattered. They were pack. They were family. They belonged together. She thought about all the changes that had happened. The embassy, the institute, the students and scientists, the trade agreements and cultural exchanges, the seats at the Galactic Council. All of it had started with one moment, one choice, one act of simple kindness toward a creature in pain. Lauren often wondered what would have happened if she had followed protocol that day. If she had walked away from the crying sound. If she had left Nova trapped and alone, the Vraken would still be classified as monsters. Humans would still be settling on their lands. The two species would still be enemies. All that potential for friendship and cooperation would have been lost. But she had not walked away. She had stopped. She had listened. She had helped. And because of that, everything was different. Not perfect, because nothing ever was. There were still problems to solve, misunderstandings to clear up, prejudices to overcome. But there was also hope. There was friendship. There was proof that different species could not just coexist but truly thrive together. Nova shifted against her side, making that soft, purring sound that Lauren had first heard 5 years ago. Lauren stroked the Vraken's fur, feeling the warmth and the gentle vibrations. She thought about the scared, hurt baby she had found, and she looked at the strong, talented, beloved adult that baby had become. This was the real reward for everything she had done. Not the fame or the awards or the institute named after her. It was this. These quiet moments with her pack. The absolute trust and love they shared. The knowledge that she had been accepted by beings who owed her nothing but gave her everything. As the 3 moons rose over the crystal forest, the pack settled in for the night. Their glow patterns synchronized, pulsing in harmony. It was a sight Lauren never tired of. A visual representation of their connection. A family of different species, different origins, different natures, all linked by choice and love. Lauren closed her eyes and listened to the sounds of the forest, the gentle humming of the crystals, the soft breathing of her pack, the distant calls of other creatures going about their lives. This was home. Not Earth, where she had been born, not the research station where she worked, but here in this clearing, surrounded by beings who had claimed her as one of their own. She had come to this planet as a scientist studying alien life. She had expected to spend her time collecting data and writing reports. She had never imagined she would find a family. She had never dreamed that one small act of compassion would ripple outward to touch the entire galaxy. But that was the thing about kindness. You never knew where it would lead. You never knew whose life you might change. You never knew what doors might open because you chose to help instead of hurt, to understand instead of fear, to love instead of hate. Lauren had shared a meal with a predator cub. By morning, the pack had claimed her as one of their own, and in doing so, they had all claimed a future that no one had thought possible. A future where different beings could look past their differences and see each other, really see each other, and recognize that beneath it all they were not so different after all. That was the real lesson. That was the truth that would echo through the ages. Every person, regardless of species or origin, had the capacity for kindness. And kindness, more than any weapon or technology, had the power to change worlds. The sound of children laughing echoed across the courtyard of the Galactic Juvenile Education Facility. Rick Walsh sat on a bench near the fountain, watching a group of young Centauri students play a game that looked like a combination of tag and zero-gravity ballet. He smiled, remembering how strange it had seemed when he first arrived 6 months ago. Now it felt normal. Rick was a staff sergeant in the Human Coalition Forces, though his current assignment barely felt like military duty. He was supposed to be training the local security teams, teaching them Earth combat techniques. Most days he spent more time telling stories to curious children than drilling soldiers. The kids loved hearing about Earth animals, especially the weird ones. Last week he had spent an entire afternoon explaining what a platypus was to a group of confused Alarian youngsters. Mr. Rick, a small voice called out. Lyra, a 9-year-old Centauri girl with silver skin and bright purple eyes, ran toward him. She held a data pad in her hands. I found a picture of that animal you told us about yesterday. The honey badger. Rick chuckled and took the pad from her. The screen showed a stocky, black and white creature with small eyes and visible claws. Yep, that's the one. Mean little thing. Fights animals 10 times its size and doesn't back down from anything. Is that why they call you honey badger? Lyra asked innocently. Rick's smile faded just a bit. His call sign was not something he advertised here. It came from a different time, a bloodier time during the border conflicts. Who told you that? He asked gently. I heard some of the security guards talking. They said you were scary when you fought. She looked worried. But you're nice to us. Rick ruffled her hair, careful not to touch the sensitive nerve clusters on her scalp. I'm nice to people who deserve nice. Animals like the honey badger, they're only dangerous when something threatens what they care about. Remember that, okay? Lyra nodded and ran back to her friends. Rick watched her go, then glanced up at the sky. It was clear today, a pale green color thanks to Viridian Iphi's unusual atmosphere. 3 moons hung visible even in daylight. Beautiful, peaceful, too peaceful. Rick's instincts had been bothering him for 3 days now. Little things. The supply ship that was supposed to arrive yesterday never showed up. The military communication channels had more chatter than usual. But when he asked about it, everyone said it was just routine exercises. This morning, he had noticed the automated defense turrets on the facility's outer walls were running diagnostic tests, which usually meant someone suspected they might need to use them soon. He had tried to talk to Headmaster Torvak about running emergency drills with the students. The Alarian administrator had shut him down immediately. "We will not frighten the children with unnecessary military exercises, Sergeant Walsh. This is a school, not a military base." Rick had wanted to argue, but Torvak was right in a way. The facility had been safe for 30 years. It housed children from 47 different species, mostly the sons and daughters of diplomats and military officers. Security was good. The location was remote. There was no reason to expect trouble, except Rick's gut said otherwise. A soft alarm chimed from his wrist communicator. Time for the afternoon assembly. Rick stood and stretched, his joints popping. He was pushing 40 now, older than most frontline soldiers, but he kept himself in shape. Had to. You never knew when old skills might be needed again. The courtyard filled with students as classes let out. Teachers guided lines of children toward the central assembly area. Rick spotted Headmaster Torvak on the raised platform adjusting his formal robes. The Ilarian took these assemblies seriously, always giving speeches about unity and education and the bright future of the coalition. Rick positioned himself near the back, eyes scanning the crowd out of habit. Security guards stood at the regular posts. Everything looked normal. He started to relax, then the shields failed. It was not dramatic. No explosion, no alarm. The shimmering blue barrier that covered the facility like an invisible dome simply vanished. Rick saw it happen because he was looking up at exactly the right moment, watching a flock of local birds that had been deflected by the shield suddenly fly straight through where it used to be. Every instinct he had screamed danger. "Get down," Rick roared, already moving. 3 seconds later, the skies split open with fire. Assault ships materialized out of stealth mode directly overhead, their hulls painted blood red. Rick recognized the design immediately. Marauder-class gunships favored by mercenary groups. The heavy weapons on their undersides glowed with charging energy. The first bombardment hit the security barracks on the east side of the facility. The building exploded in a ball of superheated plasma. The shockwave knocked dozens of children off their feet. Screaming started instantly, high-pitched and terrified. Rick was already running. His mind shifted gears, combat training taking over after months of dormancy. The armory was 300 meters away. He needed weapons. He needed to get the children to shelter. He needed to do both right now. Another explosion rocked the western guard tower. Rick saw bodies thrown through the air. The automated defenses were not responding. That meant someone had hacked the systems before the attack. This was planned. Professional dark shapes dropped from the assault ships. Mercenaries in powered armor descending on jump jets. They landed hard in the courtyard, weapons already firing. Coalition guards who tried to fight back were cut down in seconds. Rick grabbed 2 small children who were frozen in terror and shoved them behind a decorative planter. "Run to the admin building. Underground shelter, go now." One of the children, a young Threxian boy, just stared at him with huge eyes. Rick forced himself to soften his voice. "I need you to be brave. Can you do that for me? Run fast and don't look back." The boy nodded and grabbed his friend's hand. They ran. Rick moved through the chaos, pulling children out of the open, directing them toward safety. A plasma bolt seared past his head, close enough that he smelled burning air. He dove behind the fountain as more shots chewed into the stone structure. A group of students huddled near the platform, pinned down by mercenary fire. He counted 8 children. Lyra was among them, pressed flat against the ground with tears streaming down her face. Their eyes met across 30 meters of open ground. She called out his name. Rick looked at the mercenaries advancing on their position. He looked at the children. He looked at the burning buildings and the bodies of guards who had not been fast enough. Then he looked at the armory, still intact but in the opposite direction. The choice took half a second. Rick sprinted toward the children, staying low. Plasma fire tracked him, but he was moving too fast, too erratically. He had done this before in worse situations, against worse odds. His body remembered even if his mind had tried to forget. He slid in next to Lyra, using his body to shield her from incoming fire. The other children clustered around him. "Uncle Rick," Lyra sobbed. "I'm scared." Rick checked his surroundings. They were trapped. More mercenaries were landing. The coalition guards were dead or scattered. Help was not coming fast enough. He had no weapons. He had no armor. He had 8 terrified children depending on him. Rick looked down at Lyra and smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of something that had been sleeping and was now very much awake. "Stay down, kids," he said quietly. "Uncle Rick's going to work now." The honey badger was loose, and honey badgers don't care about odds. Rick moved fast through the smoke and chaos. He kept the children behind him as he navigated toward the maintenance corridors. These passages ran beneath the facility like veins, used by repair crews and rarely traveled by students or teachers. Rick had mapped them during his first week here, old habits from his combat days. Always know the terrain, always have an escape route, stay close and stay quiet, he whispered to the 8 children following him. They obeyed without question, their fear making them compliant. Good. Fear could be useful if it kept them careful. They reached a service entrance hidden behind decorative panels. Rick pried it open with his bare hands, the metal groaning but giving way. Inside, the corridor was dark and cramped. He ushered the children through and sealed the door behind them. Emergency lighting strips glowed faintly along the floor, casting green shadows. Rick led them deeper into the facility's guts, moving by memory. The shelter was on the other side of the complex, beneath the administration building. It would take 15 minutes to get there through these tunnels, 15 minutes where anything could happen. Behind them, muffled explosions continued. The facility was being torn apart. They reached an intersection. Rick held up his hand, signaling the children to stop. He listened. Footsteps above. Heavy boots. Multiple contacts. He counted at least 6 moving in formation. Professionals. He needed a weapon. Rick gestured for the children to stay put and crept forward alone. The corridor opened into a maintenance bay where ventilation systems connected. Through a ceiling grate, he could see into the hallway above. 4 mercenaries stood there, armored and armed with military-grade plasma rifles. They were executing wounded coalition guards, shooting each one in the head to confirm kills. Rick's jaw tightened. These were not soldiers following rules of engagement. These were killers on a payroll. One mercenary split off from the group, moving down a side passage. Rick waited until the others moved out of sight, then silently climbed the access ladder to the grate. He pushed it up slowly, inch by inch, making no sound. The lone mercenary walked past, oblivious. Rick exploded upward. His hand clamped over the mercenary's mouth while his other arm locked around the neck in a chokehold. The mercenary struggled, trying to bring his weapon around, but Rick was already twisting. There was a muffled crack. The body went limp. Rick lowered the corpse to the ground and stripped it quickly. Plasma rifle, sidearm, combat knife. Armor was too big and would slow him down, but he took the communication earpiece and tactical display visor. The earpiece crackled to life in his ear. Mercenary chatter, Sector 7 clear. No resistance. Main courtyard secured. We have the landing pads. Command, this is Team 3. We've got approximately 40 hostages in the auditorium, adults and juveniles. Rick filed away every piece of information. 60 combatants total based on the unit designations he was hearing. Their commander was someone called Cross. Their mission was hostage-taking, not slaughter. They wanted leverage that gave him an advantage. They would be cautious about collateral damage. He would not. Rick returned to the children. They stared at the weapons he now carried with wide eyes. Lyra looked like she might cry again. I'm still the same person, Rick said gently. These are just tools. Tools I know how to use to keep you safe. Understand? They nodded. He led them onward. The maintenance tunnels brought them near the administration building without encountering more mercenaries. Rick could see the reinforced shelter doors ahead, sealed but intact. Good. He activated the emergency override code and the heavy doors hissed open. Inside, he found chaos. 50 or 60 people, students and staff, huddled in the dim emergency lighting. Coalition guards stood at the entrance with weapons drawn until they recognized Rick. Sergeant Walsh, Lieutenant Dow, a Centauri officer with blue skin and sharp features, rushed forward. Thank the stars. We thought everyone in the courtyard was dead. Most are, Rick said flatly. He guided his group of children inside, and they were immediately swarmed by relieved teachers. What's your status? We have maybe 20 combat-capable personnel. 15 guards, 5 armed teachers. The rest are civilians and children. The shields are down, communications are jammed, and we have no contact with reinforcements. How long until help arrives? Dal's face darkened. Best case, 4 hours. The nearest coalition fleet is 3 systems away. Rick nodded. That was about what he expected. The mercenaries have 40 more hostages in the auditorium. They're planning to use them as leverage. We should fortify this position and wait for extraction, Dal said. This shelter was built to withstand orbital bombardment. We can hold. For how long? Rick asked. They control the facility. They can cut life support, vent the atmosphere, or just set demolition charges. This shelter becomes a tomb if we wait. What are you suggesting? Rick checked the plasma rifle's charge. Full. Good. I'm going back out there. Dal grabbed his arm. That's suicide. You're one man against 60 trained mercenaries. 57, Rick corrected. I already killed 3. He pulled his arm free. I'm not asking permission, Lieutenant. I'm informing you of my intentions. When you hear explosions near the auditorium, that's your signal to push out and secure the landing pads. We need to call for help. You'll never reach the auditorium alive. Rick smiled that cold smile again. You don't know much about honey badgers, do you, Lieutenant? Before Dal could respond, Rick was moving toward the shelter exit. A small voice stopped him. Uncle Rick, wait. Pax, the young Threxian boy he had saved earlier, ran up to him. The child held out a small device. I know the facility better than anyone. All the kids do. We know every vent, every hidden passage. We want to help. Rick knelt down to the boy's level. You already helped by being brave and getting to safety. That's enough. But you're going to fight them alone. That's what I do, kid. Pax's eyes filled with tears, but his voice stayed steady. The honey badger fights big things and doesn't care. You told us that. But even honey badgers need help sometimes. Rick felt something twist in his chest. He put a hand on the boy's shoulder. You're right. I do need help. I need you to stay here and protect the others. Keep them calm. Keep them safe. Can you do that for me? Pax nodded, wiping his eyes. I can do that. Good man. Rick stood and walked toward the exit. He paused at the threshold, looking back at the frightened faces watching him. Children who had been laughing and playing just an hour ago. Adults who thought today would be like any other day. Listen to me, Rick said, his voice carrying through the shelter. I know you're scared. I know this seems impossible, but I need you to believe something. I need you to believe that I will get those hostages out. I need you to believe that we will survive this. Because that belief, that hope, is what keeps us human. It's what makes us different. We don't give up. We don't abandon each other. And we sure as hell don't let monsters win. He hefted the plasma rifle. So stay strong. Stay together. And when this is over, we'll all walk out of here. That's a promise. The shelter doors sealed behind him with a solid thunk. Rick was alone in hostile territory, outnumbered and outgunned. He had been in worse situations, not many, but a few. The earpiece crackled with mercenary communications. They were consolidating positions, tightening control. They thought they had won. They thought it was over. Rick started moving through the facility like a ghost, silent, deadly, hunting time, to show them what happened when you made a human. Angry. Time to show them what a honey badger could do when you threatened its family. The children were his family now. All of them. Every single child in this facility, and Rick Walsh protected family no matter the cost. Rick moved through the facility like death wearing skin. He knew every corner of this place now, every blind spot and choke point. The mercenaries were good, but they were fighting on his ground. He found Team 5 in the eastern dormitory, 4 soldiers searching rooms for hiding children. Rick watched them from a ventilation shaft above. They moved with discipline, covering each other, checking corners. Professional work, too bad for them. Rick waited until they split into pairs, 2 entering rooms on opposite sides of the hall. Then he dropped through a ceiling panel behind the rear pair. The combat knife entered the first mercenary's neck before the man could turn. Rick caught the falling body, used it as a shield as the second mercenary spun around. The plasma bolt meant for Rick's head hit his dead comrade instead. Rick threw the corpse forward, closing distance. The mercenary backpedaled, trying to bring his rifle up. Too slow. Rick was inside his guard, striking with precise brutality. Elbow to throat. Knee to groin. Knife to chest cavity. The mercenary dropped without making a sound loud enough to alert his teammates. The other 2 emerged from their rooms and Rick was already moving. He fired the plasma rifle he had taken. Double tap center mass on the first target. The mercenary's shields flared and died. The body hit the floor. Rick rolled sideways as return fire chewed into the wall where he had been standing. He came up behind a support pillar and tossed his knife around the corner. It was a bad throw, not meant to kill, just to distract. The last mercenary tracked the movement, firing at the blade. Rick swung out and put 2 rounds through the man's helmet. 4 down. Rick salvaged ammunition and a better rifle, then melted back into the facility's hidden spaces. The mercenary communication channel erupted with status checks for Team 5. When they did not respond, the chatter changed tone. Confusion became concern. Good. Fear was a weapon too. Rick accessed the facility's internal systems through a maintenance terminal. The mercenaries had locked down most functions, but they had missed the environmental controls. Rick triggered the fire suppression systems in the western wing. Foam and chemical retardant flooded 3 corridors, killing visibility and forcing mercenary teams to relocate. While they stumbled through the foam, Rick hit them from unexpected angles. A plasma grenade rolled down a stairwell. Precisely aimed shots from long distance through windows. He was everywhere and nowhere, striking and vanishing before they could respond. The enemy commander's voice came through the earpiece, tight with anger. All teams switch to thermal imaging. The human is using the environment against us. Teams 6 and 7 converge on the western wing. Find him and kill him, Rick smiled. They were bunching up, abandoning defensive positions to hunt him. Perfect. He led them on a chase through the maintenance areas, leaving just enough traces to keep them following. Footprints in the foam. A door left slightly ajar. The occasional glimpse of movement. Basic stuff, but effective against soldiers focused on closing with an enemy. When 12 mercenaries were grouped in a junction corridor, Rick detonated the plasma battery pack he had rigged to the power conduits above them. The explosion was not huge, but it did not need to be. The conduits ruptured, spraying superheated coolant and electrical discharge. The mercenaries' shields overloaded. Men screamed. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. Rick did not stay to watch. He was already moving to his next position. The mercenary channel dissolved into chaos. Orders being shouted. Teams calling for medical assistance. Someone yelling about falling back. The commander's voice cut through it all. All units consolidate at rally points. Stop chasing him. He's baiting us into traps. Defensive positions now. Rick had bought time, but he had not freed the hostages. He needed to reach the auditorium. According to the communications he was monitoring, Commander Cross had moved the captured civilians there, using them as human shields. He made his way through the facility's upper levels, avoiding the main corridors where mercenaries had regrouped. Through a classroom window, he spotted the auditorium across the central courtyard. 20 soldiers surrounded it in defensive positions. Getting in would be nearly impossible. He needed a new approach. Rick found what he was looking for in the theater's technical booth. The facility's old communication array, shut down by the jamming but still physically intact. If he could boost the signal strength and punch through a burst transmission, he might be able to call for help. But he did not know how. This was not his specialty. Movement behind him. Rick spun, raising his weapon. Pac stood there with 3 other children. They had followed him somehow, using the passages only they knew. "What are you doing here?" Rick demanded, keeping his voice low. "I told you to stay in the shelter." "We can help," Pac said. "We know how to fix things. The teachers let us help the engineers sometimes. We can make the communication thing work." Rick wanted to send them back, but looking at their determined faces, he realized something. These children had already seen the worst. Hiding them away would not erase that, and they were offering help he desperately needed. "Okay," he said, "but you do exactly what I say when I say it." "Understood?" They nodded. While Rick kept watch, the children worked on the array with surprising skill. Pax explained what they were doing in simple terms, rerouting power and adjusting frequencies. Within 10 minutes, they had a working transmitter. "It will only work for a few seconds before the jamming blocks it again," Pax said. "What do we send?" Rick took the transmitter. He thought about complicated distress codes and tactical briefings. Then he thought about what would actually get a response from people who knew him. He set the message to repeat on emergency frequencies and hit transmit. "Academy under attack. Honey Badger needs help. Coordinates follow." The transmission burst out into space, a single shout into the dark. Then the jamming crashed back down and the array went dead. "Did it work?" one of the children asked. "We'll find out," Rick said. "Now we get you back to the shelter." He led them back through the safe routes, moving slowly and carefully. They encountered no resistance. When they reached the shelter, Lieutenant Dow was organizing a defense with the guards. "Sergeant, we heard explosions." "What's the situation?" "I've reduced their numbers and disrupted their control," Rick reported. But they still have 40 hostages in the auditorium. That's our next objective. That's suicide. They have that position locked down. Then I'll have to get creative. Rick checked his weapons. He was running low on ammunition. I need explosives, whatever you have. Dal hesitated, then nodded to one of his guards. The man brought out a small case of breaching charges used for emergency door removal. Rick took them and started rigging a harness. The children watched him work. Uncle Rick, Lyra said quietly, are you going to die? He paused, looking at her honest, scared face. He could lie, but she deserved better. Maybe, he said. But that won't stop me from trying. Because here's the thing about honey badgers, Lyra. They don't fight because they think they'll win. They fight because something needs protecting. And as long as I can still move, as long as I can still pull a trigger, those people in the auditorium have a chance. He stood up, fully armed now. Lieutenant Dal, give me 20 minutes. Then push for the landing pads with everyone who can fight. We need to signal for help. 20 minutes won't be enough. Rick headed for the exit. Then I'll just have to work faster. The doors sealed behind him for the second time. Somewhere in the facility, 40 people waited for rescue or death. Rick intended to give them the first option, even if it cost him everything. Rick observed the auditorium from his position in the ceiling crawlspace. Below him, 40 hostages sat in the center of the large room, surrounded by armed mercenaries. He counted 18 guards positioned around the perimeter. Commander Cross stood near the stage, a tall figure in crimson armor, speaking into a communication device. The hostages looked terrified. Teachers held young children close. Older students tried to stay calm, but their fear was obvious. Headmaster Torvak sat among them, his usual confident posture replaced by something broken and defeated. Rick had 18 minutes left before Lieutenant Dal's pushed to the landing pads. He needed to create enough chaos to split the mercenary forces. Time to work. He moved through the crawl space above the auditorium, planting breaching charges at key structural points. He was not trying to bring down the building, just create openings. The technical booth overlooked the main floor from a high angle. Perfect position. Rick descended into the booth quietly. The equipment here controlled lighting, sound, and environmental systems for the auditorium. He began preparing his surprise, setting timers and routing commands. Below, Commander Cross addressed the hostages. Your coalition is being contacted now. They will have simple terms. Withdraw all forces from the outer reach territories or you die. Your governments value territory less than they value your lives, so you should hope they choose wisely. A young Alarian teacher spoke up, voice shaking. Why are you doing this? These are children. Cross turned to her slowly. Because children make excellent leverage. Adults will do anything to protect their offspring. It is weakness we exploit. Rick's finger hovered over the activation switch. He wanted to kill this man so badly his hand shook. But timing mattered. He needed maximum confusion. He triggered the first charge. The explosion blew out a section of wall near the stage. Alarms immediately began wailing throughout the facility. Rick activated every sound and light system in the auditorium at once. Speakers roared with feedback. Emergency strobes flashed in random patterns. Fire suppression foam began spraying from ceiling nozzles. The mercenaries reacted instantly, training taking over. They moved to defensive positions, but their formations were broken by the chaos. Hostages scattered in panic, some running for the exits, others freezing in place. Rick dropped through a ceiling panel into the technical booth's upper platform. He began firing controlled shots into the mercenary positions below. 3 went down in the first seconds before the others located him. Return fire chewed into the booth's protective barriers. On the main floor, Headmaster Torvak saw what was happening. Saw Rick fighting alone against impossible odds. Something in the old administrator's face changed. He grabbed the young teacher next to him. Get the children to the exits, he shouted over the noise. When they're confused, we move. The teacher stared at him. We'll be killed, maybe, but that human is dying to save us. I won't let his sacrifice be wasted. Torvak stood up despite the plasma fire filling the air. Everyone move now! Exit doors, go! Some hostages ran. Others hesitated. Rick provided covering fire, forcing the mercenaries to take cover instead of shooting fleeing civilians. But there were too many angles, too many guns. A plasma bolt caught a running Centauri man in the back. He fell. A child screamed. Rick changed tactics. He threw a plasma grenade toward the largest group of mercenaries. They scattered. In that moment, Rick jumped from the booth platform. using a deployed banner as an improvised rope to swing down to the main floor. He landed hard, rolled, came up firing. The closest mercenary went down. Rick grabbed his fallen body and used it as a shield while advancing. Plasma fire from multiple directions hit the corpse. Rick fired around it, targeting weapons and exposed limbs, disabling rather than killing when possible to create obstacles and confusion. A mercenary charged him with a combat blade. Rick sidestepped, let the man's momentum carry him past, then shot him in the back. He spun and fired at a mercenary trying to line up a shot on fleeing hostages. The shot went wide but made the mercenary duck. Half the hostages were out now, running through the exits. Rick moved to a position between them and the mercenaries, drawing fire deliberately. Plasma bolts scorched past him. One grazed his arm, burning through sleeve and skin. He ignored the pain. Commander Cross appeared from behind cover, his personal shields shimmering. "You must be the one they call Honey Badger. I heard you were dead." "Not yet," Rick said, firing. His shot splashed harmlessly off Cross's military-grade shields. "You cannot win this. Look around. My men still outnumber you. The hostages you saved will be recaptured. Your heroics change nothing." Rick smiled, blood running down his burned arm. "You're wrong. I already won. How? Because those kids are running. Because that old administrator found his courage. Because humans don't measure victory by whether we survive. We measure it by whether we protected what mattered." Cross raised his weapon. "Then die with your pride." The auditorium doors burst open. Lieutenant Dal and 20 armed defenders poured in, firing as they came. The mercenaries, caught between Rick's position and the new threat, broke formation. Some tried to return fire. Others attempted to flee. Rick used the confusion to close distance with Cross. He tackled the commander, both of them crashing to the floor. Cross was stronger, his armor giving him advantage. They struggled for control. Above them, the ceiling groaned. Rick's charges had done more damage than he intended. Structural supports were failing. Dal's voice rang out. "Everyone out. Buildings coming down!" The defenders grabbed hostages and ran. Rick and Cross continued fighting among the chaos. The commander's fist caught Rick's jaw, snapping his head back. Rick responded with an elbow strike that cracked Cross's helmet visor. "You're insane," Cross gasped. "We're both going to die." "Good," Rick said and punched him again. Hands grabbed Rick from behind. Lieutenant Dal and 2 guards were dragging him toward the exit. "Let go," Rick shouted. "He's their commander." "And you're no good to anyone dead," Dal snapped. "Move." They ran for the exit as the ceiling began collapsing. Cross scrambled to his feet and ran the opposite direction, heading for a side emergency exit. Dust and debris filled the air. The main chandelier fell, crushing 2 mercenaries who were too slow. Rick's group burst out into the courtyard just as a section of the auditorium roof caved in. They kept running, putting distance between themselves and the collapsing structure. Behind them, explosions echoed as power systems overloaded. When they finally stopped, Rick counted heads. All the hostages were out, some wounded but alive. The defenders had taken casualties, but most survived. Lieutenant Dal looked at the burning auditorium, then at Rick. "That was the most reckless, stupid, insane thing I have ever witnessed." Rick wiped blood from his mouth. "Did it work?" "The hostages are free. The mercenaries are scattered." "I'd say yes, it worked," a young voice called out. "Uncle Rick!" Lyra's older sister ran toward them from the group of freed hostages. She threw her arms around Rick, sobbing. "Thank you. Thank you for saving us." Rick awkwardly patted her back, uncomfortable with the gratitude. "Just doing my job." "No," Headmaster Torvak approached, his robes torn and dirty. "You did far more than your job. You gave us hope when we had none. You showed us what courage looks like." The old Ilarian met Rick's eyes. "I was wrong about you. Wrong to dismiss your concerns. Wrong to think peace meant we could forget how to fight. You tried to prepare us and I refused to listen." Rick shook his head. "Doesn't matter now. We're not done yet. Cross is still out there with at least 20 mercenaries. We need to secure the landing pads and call for real help." As if summoned by his words, a low rumble filled the air. Everyone looked up. The sky split open with light. Coalition fighters screamed through the atmosphere, weapons hot and targeting systems locked. Behind them, the massive shape of a battle cruiser dropped out of faster-than-light travel, its hull bearing the name Vigilant. Rick's emergency transmission had gotten through. Help had arrived. The Coalition fighters hit the mercenary ships like hammers of light. Plasma cannons tore into the Marauder-class vessels still hovering above the facility. One exploded immediately, its reactor breaching in a brilliant flash. The other two tried to run, activating their stealth systems and boosting for orbit. They did not make it. Missiles from the Vigilant tracked them through every evasion attempt. The second ship died in a cascade of secondary explosions. The third managed to return fire, its desperate shots splashing against the battlecruiser's shields, before a fighter wing surrounded it and pounded it into debris. The sky cleared of threats in under 3 minutes. On the ground, the remaining mercenaries saw their escape routes vanish. Some threw down their weapons immediately. Others, either braver or more foolish, tried to fight. Coalition Marines dropped from assault shuttles, heavily armed and ready for combat. The brief firefights that erupted were one-sided. Rick watched it happen from the courtyard, leaning against a broken fountain. His body was starting to register all the damage he had taken. Burns, cuts, bruises, probably some cracked ribs. His right arm was barely functional. But he stayed on his feet because sitting down felt too much like giving up. Lieutenant Dahl coordinated with the arriving Marines, directing them to pockets of remaining resistance. The freed hostages were being evacuated to the shuttles for medical treatment. Children cried, some in relief, others still terrified. Teachers did their best to comfort them. A shuttle landed near Rick's position. The ramp dropped and a familiar figure strode out. Commander Yates, human, 50s, with gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from old leather. He wore full combat armor and carried himself like someone who had been fighting wars since before Rick was born. Because he had. "Rick Walsh," Yates said, looking him over. "You look like hell." "Feel worse," Rick admitted. "Good to see you, Commander. Got your message. Honey Badger needs help. That's a first. You've never asked for help before." Yates glanced around at the destroyed facility, the bodies, the frightened children being led to safety. "Looks like you did pretty well on your own, though." "Had help. The lieutenant here and his people. The kids, too. Brave little things." Yates nodded slowly. "How many mercenaries?" "Started with 60. I dropped maybe 15. The rest scattered or surrendered when you showed up." 15, Yates let that sink in. "You killed 15 trained mercenaries while protecting hostages and coordinating a defense. With no backup and no plan." Rick shrugged, then winced as the movement pulled something painful in his shoulder. "Had a plan. It was just a bad plan. But bad plans are better than no plans." A medic approached, but Rick waved him off. "I'm fine. Check the kids first." "Sir, you're bleeding." "I said I'm fine." Yates dismissed the medic with a gesture. When they were alone, the older man's expression softened slightly. "You know you could have died here, right? Against those odds, you should have died." "Yeah, I know. So why? Why not get yourself to safety and wait for us?" Rick looked across the courtyard to where Lyra sat with her sister, both of them wrapped in emergency blankets. The little girl saw him looking and waved. He waved back with his good arm. "Because she called my name," Rick said quietly. "Because I couldn't leave them. Because someone had to stand between these kids and the monsters. And I was here, so it had to be me." Yates followed his gaze. "The human condition. We can't help ourselves. We see someone in trouble and we have to help even when it's stupid." "Especially when it's stupid," Rick agreed. A commotion drew their attention. Marines were escorting a group of captured mercenaries through the courtyard. Among them, limping and covered in dust, was Commander Cross. His expensive armor was dented and his helmet was missing. He saw Rick and stopped walking, staring. "You," Cross said. "You should be dead." "The building collapsed. I got out. But how? How did one man do all this?" Cross looked genuinely confused. "We outnumbered you, outgunned you, had every advantage. How did we lose?" Rick pushed himself off the fountain, standing straight despite the pain. "Because you thought this was a military operation. Calculated risks and acceptable losses. But for me, this was personal. Every child in this facility became my responsibility the moment you attacked. And humans don't do well with math when someone threatens our kids. We don't care about odds. We care about protecting what matters." Cross shook his head. "Your species is insane." "Probably," Rick agreed. "But we're your insane species. We're the ones who show up when everyone else says it's impossible. We're the ones who stand and fight when logic says to run. And we're the ones who will tear through an army to save a single child. Remember that. Make sure whoever hired you remembers it too." The Marines led Cross away. Yates chuckled. "Making speeches now? You really did hit your head." "Maybe." Rick finally allowed himself to sit down on the fountain's edge. How bad is it? The casualties? Yates's expression grew serious. 47 coalition personnel dead. 12 students. 19 injured critically. It's bad, Rick, but it would have been worse. If you hadn't acted, if you hadn't bought time, we would have arrived to find hundreds dead and the survivors held hostage. Rick closed his eyes. 12 students. 12 children who had been laughing and playing just hours ago. He could see their faces in his mind, knew their names, felt their weight settle on his shoulders alongside all the other ghosts he carried. Hey. Yates's hand gripped his shoulder. You saved hundreds more. That matters. Doesn't feel like it. It never does. But those kids over there, they're alive because of you. Their families get to hold them again. That has to count for something. Rick opened his eyes and looked around the courtyard again. Saw the survivors. Saw the relief and grief mixing on their faces. Saw Pax and his friends being reunited with their parents who had just arrived on the shuttles. Saw Lyra running toward him, breaking free from her sister. She crashed into him and hugged him tight, careful of his injuries. You did it, Uncle Rick, you saved us. Rick hugged her back with his good arm, feeling something tight in his chest. We saved each other, kid. You and Pax and all the brave people here. Everyone who didn't give up. That's why we're still standing. Headmaster Torvak approached slowly. The old Ilarian looked like he had aged years in a single day. Sergeant Walsh, I owe you an apology. Several apologies. And my life, along with the lives of everyone here. You fought when it counted, Rick said. That's what mattered. I should have listened to you. Should have prepared. Should have run those drills you requested. Torvak's voice broke slightly. 12 students died because I was too proud, too certain we were safe. No, Rick said firmly. They died because mercenaries attacked a school. Because someone evil made an evil choice. You're not responsible for what they did. None of us are. Torvak wiped his eyes. How do you carry it? The weight of those we couldn't save? Rick looked at Lyra, still holding on to him. At the other children being loaded onto evacuation shuttles. At the survivors helping each other through the wreckage. By remembering the ones we did save, he said. By making sure their survival means something. By being better tomorrow than we were today. Medical personnel finally convinced Rick to let them treat his injuries. They loaded him onto a stretcher despite his protests. As they carried him toward a medical shuttle, children lined the path. Some waved. Some called his name. Some just watched with wide, grateful eyes. Pax ran up and pressed something into Rick's hand. The honey badger figurine the children had been carving in art class, now finished. For you, the boy said. So you remember us? Rick's throat felt tight. I could never forget you, Pax. Any of you. The medical shuttle lifted off, carrying Rick toward the Vigilance medical bay. Through the window, he watched the facility grow smaller below. The destruction was obvious from the air. Collapsed buildings, scorch marks. The evidence of violence, but also evidence of survival. People moving through the wreckage, helping each other, refusing to be broken. That was humanity's real strength, Rick thought, as exhaustion finally claimed him. Not that they were strong or fast or clever, but that they refused to give up. That they cared so deeply for others that they would fight impossible battles and endure terrible costs. That when a child cried out in fear, a human answered, and nothing in the universe could stop them from trying to help. Nothing at all. 3 months passed before Rick was cleared for duty again. The doctors on the Vigilant had patched him up, but the injuries went deeper than burns and broken bones. He spent 2 weeks in the medical bay, another month in rehabilitation, and several sessions with a counselor who specialized in combat trauma. Rick hated every minute of it, but he went through the motions. The counselor was a patient Ilarian woman named Vera, who let him sit in silence for most of their sessions. Eventually he started talking. About the children who died. About the ones who survived. About the weight of choosing who to save first when everyone needed saving. You did everything possible, Vera said during their last session. You know that, right? Knowing it and feeling it are different things, Rick replied. They are. But feeling guilty for not being able to save everyone just means you care. And the galaxy needs people who care, Sergeant Walsh. Especially now. Rick was stationed on Frontier Base 7 when he received the message. It was a video file, marked as coming from the Galactic Juvenile Education Facility. He almost deleted it, not ready to face those memories. But something made him open it. The screen showed the facility's courtyard, rebuilt and clean. Students walked between classes. Teachers supervised. Everything looked normal again, peaceful. Then the camera panned to show a memorial garden that had not existed before. Stone pathways wound between flowering plants from dozens of worlds. At the center stood a statue carved from white marble. It showed a human figure, battle-worn and determined, with children of various species gathered around him in protective embrace. The plaque at its base read, "The Honey Badger. When Earth sends its best, they send their heart, in memory of those lost, in honor of those who stood." The video continued. Headmaster Torvak appeared on screen, looking older but steadier than Rick remembered. "Sergeant Walsh, if you are watching this, I wanted you to see what we built. The memorial honors everyone who fell defending this facility. But the statue is you specifically because you embodied something we needed to remember. That courage is not about being unafraid. It is about acting despite fear. That strength is not about overpowering others. It is about protecting those who cannot protect themselves." The camera shifted to show Lyra, now several months older and smiling. "Hi, Uncle Rick, I hope you're doing okay. We miss you. I wanted to tell you something. After everything happened, I was really scared. Scared to go back to class. Scared to be alone. But then I remembered what you said about honey badgers. They don't care about being scared. They just do what needs doing. So I tried to be brave like you, and it got easier. Thank you for teaching us that." More children appeared in the video, each sharing a brief message. Pax talked about how he wanted to join the coalition forces when he grew up, to help protect others like Rick had protected them. Others shared artwork they had made, stories they had written, ways they had found courage in dark moments by remembering the human who had fought for them. The video ended with Commander Yates appearing on screen. "Rick, stop being stubborn and check your messages. You've received commendations from 7 different governments. The coalition is offering you any posting you want. The facility wants you to come back as head of security with triple your old pay, and about 100 families want to thank you personally. You're famous now. Deal with it." Rick sat in his small quarters on the base, staring at the blank screen. Famous. He did not want to be famous. He wanted to be left alone to do his job. His communicator chimed. "Incoming call." He almost ignored it, but the caller ID made him pause. "Lieutenant Dal." Rick answered. Dal's blue face appeared, looking pleased. "Sergeant Walsh, good to see you up and around. Lieutenant, what can I do for you?" "Actually, I'm calling with an offer. The facility is reopening next month. They want a complete security overhaul. New protocols, new training, new everything. They asked me to head the project. I accepted on one condition, that you join my team." Rick hesitated. "I don't know if I can go back there." "I understand. But consider this. Those children remember you. They need to see that heroes don't just disappear after the battle. They keep going, keep working, keep caring. Your presence there would mean more than any security system we could install. I'm not a hero, Dal. I'm just a soldier who got lucky." "You're wrong. You're exactly what a hero looks like. Imperfect, stubborn, willing to sacrifice everything for others. That's the definition." Dal leaned closer to the camera. "The children need to see that you survived. That doing the right thing doesn't always mean dying for it. Sometimes it means living with it and choosing to keep helping people." Rick thought about the statue in the memorial garden, about Lyra's message, about all the children who were finding courage by remembering what one determined human had done. "I'll think about it," Rick said finally. "That's all I ask. Take your time. The offer stands whenever you're ready." The call ended. Rick sat alone with his thoughts. Outside his window, Frontier Base 7 bustled with activity. Ships coming and going, soldiers training, people living their lives unaware that somewhere out there, a single act of desperate courage had become a story told across worlds. Rick opened his footlocker and pulled out the honey badger figurine Pax had given him. The carving was rough, childish, but made with care. He set it on his desk where he could see it. Maybe Dal was right. Maybe going back was the right choice. Not to be celebrated or honored, but to show those children that you could face horror and come out the other side. That scars heal. That life continues. That protecting others is a responsibility that does not end when the battle does. His communicator chimed again. This time it was a text message from an unknown number. Rick opened it. "Uncle Rick, this is Pax. Lieutenant Dal gave me your contact info. I hope that's okay. I wanted you to know something. I'm starting a club at the facility. It's called the Honey Badger Corps. We help younger students when they're scared. We stand up to bullies. We do volunteer work in the community. We try to be brave like you were. Like you are. 30 kids joined in the first week. We wear patches with a honey badger on them. Is that okay? Rick stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed a reply. It's more than okay, Pax. It's perfect. Keep being brave. Keep helping others. That's what matters most. I'm proud of you. He sent the message, then stood and walked to his window. Looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, children were learning that courage was not about being fearless. It was about choosing to act despite fear. That strength was not about domination. It was about protection. That humans, for all their flaws and weaknesses, had something special. They cared. They refused to give up. They stood between the innocent and the dark, and when a child cried out, they answered. Rick made his decision. He would go back to the facility, not as a hero seeking glory, but as a teacher showing students what it meant to keep going after tragedy, to turn pain into purpose, to transform fear into determination, because that was the real legacy of the honey badger. Not the violence or the desperate battle, but the choice to keep caring, keep protecting, keep standing up for those who needed someone in their corner. He opened his communicator and sent a message to Lieutenant Dahl. I accept your offer. When do we start? The response came back immediately. Welcome back, Sergeant. We start by rebuilding, together. Rick smiled slightly. Rebuilding, that felt right. Take something broken and make it whole again. Take frightened children and help them find strength. Take a tragedy and transform it into a lesson about resilience. That was the human way. Not the strongest. Not the fastest. Not the most advanced. But the ones who refused to quit. The ones who cared so deeply that they would fight impossible battles and carry impossible burdens. The ones who, when darkness came, chose to be the light. Rick packed his gear that night. Tomorrow he would ship out to Viridian IV, back to the facility where he had nearly died, back to the children who remembered him, back to the work of protecting and teaching and showing others that courage was not about never being afraid. It was about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. As he prepared to sleep, Rick looked one more time at the honey badger figurine on his desk. Such a small thing, such a simple gift, but it represented something larger. Hope, resilience, the refusal to give up even when everything seemed lost. He thought about all the children across the galaxy who would hear the story of the Academy attack, who would learn about the human who stood alone against an army because it was the right thing to do, who would find their own courage in his example. That was the real victory. Not surviving the battle, but inspiring others to be brave in their own battles, whatever form those took. To stand up when it was easier to stay down. To protect when it was safer to hide. To care when it was simpler not to. Rick closed his eyes and for the first time in 3 months slept without nightmares. Because he had made his choice. He would keep going. Keep helping. Keep standing between children in danger for as long as he was able. That was enough. That was everything. The honey badger was going home, and somewhere in the dark between stars the story spread, whispered in coalition briefing rooms and mercenary hideouts and civilian gatherings. The story of one human who had shattered enemy lines with nothing but determination and an absolute refusal to let children die on his watch. The story of what happens when you threaten something a human has decided to protect. The story of the honey badger who didn't care about odds, only about doing what was right. And the galaxy listened and learned and remembered. Because some stories, some acts of courage echo forever. This was one of them. The Great Council Chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive station that had witnessed 1,000 years of galactic politics. Inside its gleaming halls, representatives from 47 different species gathered for what many considered a mere formality. Earth was finally being admitted to the Galactic Council, and most of the assembled aliens expected it to be a brief, amusing ceremony. Ambassador Li Chen stood at the center of the circular chamber, her dark suit simple compared to the elaborate robes and armor worn by the alien delegates around her. She was a small woman by human standards, but she carried herself with quiet dignity as holographic displays flickered to life around her, showing Earth's credentials for membership. High Counselor Threen, an ancient insectoid whose species had mastered space travel before humans discovered fire, clicked his mandibles together in what might have been amusement. His compound eyes reflected the light from a dozen different angles as he examined the human data. "Let us review Earth's military capacity," Threen announced. His voice translated into 100 languages simultaneously. "They claim to possess 3,000 capital ships." A ripple of chittering and low-frequency rumbles moved through the chamber. Several delegates made sounds that the translation systems rendered as laughter. Admiral Voss of the Calvex Empire rose from his seat, his forearms spreading wide in a gesture of disbelief. His scaled face twisted into what humans would recognize as a smirk. The Calvex were the Council's dominant military power, and Voss had commanded fleets for 2 centuries. He had seen countless species make exaggerated claims about their capabilities. "Ambassador Chen," Voss said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Your species has been in space for barely 300 years. The Calvex Empire has been building warships for 12,000 years, and we possess 800 capital ships. You expect us to believe that primitive Earth has built nearly 4 times our fleet?" Chen remained still, her face unreadable. "The numbers in our report are accurate, Admiral." "Accurate?" Voss laughed, a barking sound that echoed through the chamber. "You also claim your ships can travel faster than light without dark matter cores. You claim weapons that manipulate gravity itself. You claim engine systems that violate known physics." He turned to address the full council. "Honored members, humanity is either deeply confused about their own capabilities, or they are telling stories to make themselves seem more important than they are." A delegate from the Threen Collective, a floating crystalline being, chimed in with a sound like bells. "Perhaps humans have difficulty with mathematics? 300 ships might seem like 3,000 to a young species." More laughter filled the chamber. Chen's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Councillor Threen brought the chamber to order with a sharp clicking sound. "Ambassador Chen, we mean no offense. All young species wish to appear strong when they join the galactic community. It is natural. But we must deal with facts, not fantasies." "The facts are in the report," Chen replied calmly. "Then perhaps you could provide a demonstration?" Voss suggested, his tone making it clear he expected no such thing. "Bring one of these miraculous ships here? Show us these impossible engines?" Chen met his gaze steadily. "Our military assets are currently deployed in defensive positions around Earth territory. We prefer not to move them without strategic necessity." "Of course," Voss said, waving a dismissive hand. "How convenient." The High Counselor pulled up another section of the human report, projecting it large enough for all to see. "Your species also claims to have colonized 2,000 star systems in 3 centuries. Ambassador, the Calvex Empire has colonized 900 systems in 12 millennia. Do you see why we find your claims questionable? Humans reproduce quickly and adapt to diverse environments," Chen explained. "Our expansion rate may seem unusual, but it reflects our biology and determination." A reptilian delegate from the Sorn hegemony hissed with amusement. "Determination does not build starships, Ambassador. Resources and technology do. And your homeworld is barely developed compared to our standards." Chen's eyes narrowed slightly. "Earth invests heavily in deep space infrastructure. Most of our industrial capacity is not on the homeworld." "Invested where?" Voss challenged. "We have surveyed the systems you claim to occupy. We see colonies, yes, but nothing that would support military production on the scale you describe. No orbital shipyards, no resource extraction networks, no... Perhaps human facilities are simply difficult for your sensors to detect," Chen interrupted quietly. The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then Voss threw back his head and laughed, a genuine sound of delight. "Oh, this is wonderful. Not only do you have thousands of impossible ships, but they are also invisible. Do they fire invisible weapons as well? Perhaps they are crewed by invisible soldiers?" Even Councillor Threen seemed amused now. "Ambassador Chen, we appreciate your species' enthusiasm. Truly. But the Galactic Council operates on verifiable information, not mythology. We understand that Earth has rich cultural traditions of storytelling. Perhaps your military has confused your science fiction entertainment with reality." Chen's hands clenched briefly at her sides, then relaxed. She had been warned this would happen. The intelligence reports on the Council had predicted exactly this reaction. Humanity's capabilities were so far outside galactic norms that the truth sounded like fantasy. "I assure you, Counselor, we know the difference between fiction and reality," she said. "Then you will not object to our verification protocols?" Threen asked. "We will send survey teams to your territory. They will assess your actual military capacity and adjust your membership status accordingly." "You are welcome to send observers," Chen agreed. "Though I suspect your reports will match ours." Voss snorted. "I suspect your reports will need significant downward revision. But do not worry, Ambassador. The Council does not punish optimism. We will grant you membership based on what you actually possess, not what you wish you possessed." The voting proceeded quickly. Humanity was granted junior membership status in the Galactic Council, with all the limitations that implied. They would have access to peripheral trade routes but not core systems. They could send representatives to council sessions but would have no vote on major decisions for at least a century, and for their own protection, the Council would assign a Calvex fleet to patrol human space. 12 destroyers should be sufficient, Voss announced magnanimously. They will guard your territory from pirates and ensure you are not overwhelmed by threats you cannot handle alone. Chen bowed slightly. The Council's generosity is noted. As the session ended and delegates filed out, many discussing the amusing human claims, Chen remained in the chamber for a moment. She looked up at the stars visible through the transparent dome overhead. Somewhere out there, beyond the Council's perception, thousands of human warships maintained their silent vigil. Weapons that could crack planets waited in cold storage. Fleets that could cross the galaxy in hours stood ready. Earth had not lied in its report, but Earth had also learned long ago that sometimes the greatest advantage was being underestimated. Chen touched her communication device. "Report to Earth Command. They don't believe us. Proceed with protocol silence. Maintain all defensive positions. Do not reveal capabilities unless absolutely necessary." The reply came instantly. "Understood, Ambassador. Humanity will wait." Chen allowed herself a small, grim smile. The galaxy had laughed at Earth's military might. She wondered how long it would take before they stopped laughing. She wondered if they would still be alive when they finally understood the truth. The galaxy was about to learn a hard lesson about humanity. They did not exaggerate their strength. If anything, they understated it. 3 months passed since humanity joined the Galactic Council. In that time, Ambassador Chen had attended countless meetings, negotiated trade agreements, and endured patronizing advice from species that considered humans little more than clever children. The 12 Calvex destroyers patrolled human space faithfully, their crews reporting back that Earth's military was exactly as underwhelming as Admiral Voss had predicted. Everything changed on a Tuesday. The first alarm screamed through Calvex border stations at 0400 Standard Galactic Time. Commander Thex, a veteran officer monitoring the deep space sensors, stared at his display in confusion. The readings made no sense. Thousands of signatures appearing from nowhere, moving impossibly fast. "Sensor malfunction," he muttered. "Running diagnostics." But the diagnostics came back clean. The signatures were real. Then the first border station went silent. Then the second. Then an entire star system's communications cut out simultaneously. Within an hour, the Calvex Empire's military command center was in chaos. Reports flooded in from multiple sectors. Unknown hostile forces were pouring through the galactic barrier, a region of unstable space that marked the edge of explored territory. Nothing was supposed to be able to cross that barrier in large numbers. Admiral Voss stood in the command center, his forearms working different control panels as he tried to make sense of the invasion. His scales had gone pale, a sign of stress in his species. "What are we facing?" he demanded. "Analysis identifies them as devourers, sir," his intelligence officer reported, her voice shaking. "Machine intelligences? We have records of minor encounters over the centuries, but nothing like this. The computer estimates 50,000 hostile ships, possibly more." 50,000. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. The entire Calvex military had 800 capital ships. Even if they called in every council species, they might assemble 3,000 ships total. And from the initial reports, Devourer technology was proving brutally effective against Council defenses. The Devourers were not like organic species. They did not negotiate. They did not retreat. They simply consumed everything in their path, breaking down matter to build more of themselves. They were a plague of steel and artificial intelligence, and they were adapting to Council weapons in real time. Pull back all forces to defensive positions, Voss ordered. Evacuate the border systems. Get those civilians out now. But even as he gave the orders, he knew they were too slow. Council ships needed hours to cross from one star system to another. The Devourers were faster, much faster. In 4 days, 17 Calvec star systems fell silent. Billions of citizens were killed or captured, their bodies and ships processed into raw materials for more Devourer vessels. The killing machines advanced like a wave of destruction, unstoppable and relentless. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The chamber that had been filled with laughter 3 months ago now echoed with panic and fear. High Counselor Threen's voice was strained as he addressed the assembly. The Devourer invasion force is unlike anything in recorded history. They are advancing toward core worlds. At current speed, they will reach densely populated systems within 2 weeks. We must mount a defense. We are mounting a defense.